I just got this email from Anthony Miller asking me to review his first episode.
Who's Anthony Miller?
He's the one that I think you might have interacted with him a little bit. I'm not sure. He's easier to talk to. He's a nicer guy.
He's done a TED Talk and all that stuff. He's the one who brought Cara Santa Maria to John DeLynn.
Oh.
He says he's like a libertarian or something like that. And I had a back and forth with him kind of recently, telling him right on that one where Jonathan told him that we would be willing to debate Larson and being the people who came on. And so then he started going back and forth with me and gave that kind of typical-ish answer of, well, that doesn't really seem like Mormon content, the stuff that you guys are talking about. Like, all you guys ever do is weave in politics into your stuff all the time.
No, I was talking about that in the group chat about how I used to sort of have that. When I first left the church, I had kind of this policy in ex-Mormon space. It's like, okay, I'm not going to talk about politics because I could tell really quickly that my politics were different than a lot of the people who left the church because, a lot of them went pretty woke. But then, like, the more I dug into it, the more I was like, okay, but like, you guys don't have the same rule. You always tell me not to bring up politics, but you guys are always bringing up politics, and they do that. Yeah. They do that thing that lefties always do when you say, "Well, okay, I thought we weren't supposed to talk about politics on this page." So if it's about like transgenders, transgender rights, or anything, they'd be like, "Oh, human lives aren't politics." It's anything that I want to talk about. It's not politics. It's a matter of life and death.
It's definitely Marcuse a double standard, and like that thing's like you say with the Foucault, when you see people using the double standards, like, I know you haven't read Foucault, but you're doing it.
You don't need to.
I've told the story before about like this is the same long time ago, but when I worked in Cube Farm,
first off,
a lady that yelled at me. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there's me. Like, I understand Foucault 50 times better today than when I got a paper published talking about Foucault. I understand what it is to be able to regurgitate Foucault without really knowing Foucault.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It was the same lady, like, because I've told the story before. I don't even like it. But I was talking to my Cube neighbor, about what's Polynesian food was like, because we like trying new food. And I was like, hey, there's a Polynesian restaurant that opened up over blah blah blah. He's like, what's Polynesian food like? And I said, well, there's a lot of teriyaki sauce and coconut milk. And this lady from 3 cubes down yelled, like, that's racist. That's a generalization. That's racist. And I'm like, have you been to a luau? I said that. I was like, because I was really flabbergasted. I was like, wait, no, like, it's a lot of teriyaki sauce and coconut milk, and that's not bad. Those are good things. Like, anyway, another time, another place, like, because this company used to do a thing where, like, if we hit our targets, they took us all out to lunch somewhere. And, this was, I don't know, I think this was 2004. And she was talking about something about the election. I don't even remember which side. It was something about pharmaceuticals. And she's going on about, like, oh, yeah, this president elect, this candidate, blah, 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 with the things. And I just said something about, like, well, no, I don't think that's really accurate because, he was talking about this and you're talking about drugs coming over the border and, the FDA regulates those things differently. And she's like, we shouldn't be talking politics.
Yeah. Larson's even dropped it in some of their episodes that he basically says, when I talk about that stuff, I'm just talking about the base truths of reality. And when you guys are talking about stuff, it's politics. And whenever somebody brings up politics, he goes, I just think it's deeper than politics. It's deeper than politics. What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is my politics count, yours don't. That's what I mean by that. Like,
I'm trying to save human lives.
Yeah, exactly. This is the one he just asked me to look, and he says he's going to try to talk to more conservative people. He himself calls himself a libertarian. I'm sure he'll try. Maybe he'll do better than John DeLynn or something like that, and bring that about. He says that's what this thing is. Right off the bat, you're already losing using the word deconstruction. I'll tell you that right now.
I'm going to try to talk to conservatives. Like, it's hard.
Yeah. Well, it is hard. It is hard because if they say their stuff on your platform, you can get canceled and screamed at for it.
Oh yeah, I guess. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. That was if you looked at the live comments on that Rod Meldrum thing, because I watched parts of it live. He was very chastising and stupid. Like, they were constantly treating him like a little kid, putting him through that struggle session. But if you looked at the comments during the live chat, it was like, you're not doing enough. Like, they were getting mad at him. They're getting mad at John DeLynn for not being mean enough Rod Melvin?
Flynn had to do it. Yeah, he had to do it. He could not do it, or it was being inappropriate, or incautious.
But it's funny because you're trying to appeal to a mob that doesn't even want to be appealed to. Like there's no possible way to win with those people because it's just a bunch of people falling over each other trying to morally posture. Like you can't appeal to them. If you try to appeal to people like me, then I'm easy to please. Just ask them questions. Ask Rod Melvin questions about his weird theory that all of the book of like gigantic million-person battles happened on North American soil and we don't have any evidence for it. Ask him questions about that, and when he says it, I'm like, just listen.
See, my only imagined reason to ever debate those guys, or even there was that situation this week where Jonathan Streeter posted a questioning of trans ideology post on Mormon Stories. And I don't imagine for 1 second I'm going to change the mind of an ideologue. I don't even think of that, or it does not pass my brain at all. It is 100% in the realm of people watching, people who might see this, people who've been silenced themselves and don't feel like they can talk back to this stuff, and you can just have to sit there and stare at it. But Jonathan was trying, I think, earnestly to actually talk to those people. And one of the things that he has to do when earnestly talking to those people, just let their accusations fly at them and let them fly off his back, which he does pretty good. I got on there being a little defensive of him, and then they just, of course, turn that into fodder like they always do because they're borderline personality types. But
sometimes I think it might be worthwhile to make a fake account just so I can monitor Mormon Stories again, but
you'd get booted. You'd get booted too quick.
I'd probably, if I made a brand new account and immediately signed up, they wouldn't even do it. But because I could either pretend participate as a fake, or just be
or just watch,
be full on troll. But even just to watch, just to see what's going on, I've been gone because I used to respond honestly and directly to things, and so I got banned.
Well, I usually help because I can't help it. Like on that post, I got a few comments back after Jonathan said, "Calm down," because I'm trying to talk to these guys. I'm trying to reach them. I'm trying to, in good faith, have the righteous mind conversation with them. He talked to me about some stuff about lobbing hand grenades and all that sort of stuff, and maybe is or maybe isn't, but I just kind of come into it like, you guys who are the full ideologue, I mean, you're the people I'll bat against so other people can see it, but I'm not actually trying to talk to you guys at all. After a minute, I can't help but just want to throw hand grenades. I think that's the whole way James Lindsay's entire Twitter went, is that, and he's even described that before, is after he goes, after a minute, you realize that you cannot have, the guy who wrote How to Have Impossible Conversations book, he went full lob bombing on Twitter because he said, they are only playing this game too. They aren't here for that. And
exactly. They will not have the conversation.
Yeah. And so then I get to a point where I just always start getting snarky, or I do lob bombs or whatever. But I can't just sit there and watch some of the stuff. So I either have to ignore it, not look. Like I said, there was a couple things that dinged that said that some of them replied to some of my things. Whatever it is, I just have to let it sit there, because if I go and look at it, I'm going to end up replying to it, and just 90% of what you want to do to them is say that's hypocritical. Oh, what you just said there was wrong and incorrect. Oh, you just framed something in a way that was a complete lie. And I can't help but say, no, that was a lie. And if I go and read it and see a lie in there, I'm going to have to say something back to it.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Jared's pretty good at just stringing them along and letting them be idiots. A part of me too is that we know that whole Socratic method of how to break down, how to deconstruct, how to take apart an argument, in that with questioning and making people expose them. And to me, at some level, if I know somebody's doing that to me, or I'm doing that to them, or whatever, it feels just as disingenuous as anything. So let's just get right back to directness. Just let me be direct.
So here's the problem with that. Have you ever been accused of sealioning?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was so confused the first time. I was like, what the hell is they talking about?
I know.
It's just complaining about the Socratic method. That's all it's complaining about.
It's sealioning refers to the disingenuous action of being, by a commenter, making an ostensible effort to engage in sincere and serious civil debate, usually by asking persistent questions to the other commenter. But the only thing that's wrong with that is that the beginning where it says the disingenuous action. The rest of it, if you take that out of it,
Well, they say that thing's like, how do you know it's disingenuous? Well, because I don't agree.
I know there's no possible way to know that, and I exactly that all the time.
It really, yeah. It's like it's funny because like, and they act like, oh, this is a real thing. It's like, no, it's just a word that you can use to shut people up when you don't like what they're saying.
Usually by asking persistent questions of the other commenter. What? Isn't that how you have discussions?
You get the thing where it's like, when somebody dodges a question, like when you ask a very simple question, like, like, are mammals sexually dimorphic?
Yeah, but that's just it. It's
like are mammals sexually dimorphic? They'll be like, wow, you have a Western colonial. Like, no, are mammals sexually dimorphic? I'm like, wow, the problem with you Trump lovers is, and like, no, and they say, see, you're sealining. Like, no, I'm asking you.
You're sealining. You're trying to have you're pretending.
Are mammals?
Your sincerity is feigned. Okay,
yeah,
well,
so sealining, that is the negative term for what the Socratic method is. Like, the Socratic method is ask you questions until we all kind of expose where our weak spots are. That's what they know it, and so they give it a negative term, and they'll harp about it if you start doing it or something like that.
Well, if you give something a name, people love to know. It lends it legitimacy. So something I noticed with a lot of ex-Mormons do this, is like any type of new lefty does this thing where they try to collect fallacies. They try to know what all of the debate fallacies are, and it's helpful to,
it's not helpful when they're bad at applying them. Like,
I know they're terrible at applying them, but like sealining is one of those things that like they develop this thing where that seems to be the final defense against somebody who, like, you're trying to coax into bigotry, and they're, no matter how mean you are to them, they're not being mean back. You then get accused of sealining, of insincerely being sincere.
Yeah, it's the ultimate kind of Dunning-Kruger thing when people kind of get somewhat aware of logical fallacies and then misuse them all the time. Like the whataboutism thing, people think whataboutism is like a game stopper for all things. But
that's one of the ones I've seen misused the most. That is like such bullshit. Where it's like, no, it's perfectly appropriate to compare two like things.
Two candidates. We have two candidates as an option. There's no such thing as a whataboutism fallacy there.
Yeah.
Whataboutism is, it's funny because all I've ever seen whataboutism used for is if you try to point out a double standard.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't apply if he was a man. Like, if
so it's a power struggle.
Imagine a criminal courtroom in common law jurisdiction, where it's like, okay, well, you're guilty of littering, and so I'm going to sentence you to death. And the defense attorney says, Your Honor, what about precedent? And the judge says, hey, that's a fallacy. What about all those other people that littered and only got a small fine? You're like, no, that's not a fallacy. You're allowed.
That's equal application of the law.
But I literally had people use that kind of thing at me. Where like, oh, that's whataboutism. I'm like, no, you're comparing two like things.
Mm-hmm. If the whataboutism, like a real whataboutism, is like, say you're talking about Donald Trump's naughty words that he said, and then you go like, well, what about Benghazi or something like that? And even then, you're still kind of comparing two candidates. So it's just
not completely different, but yeah, that's
like,
a better.
What about Antifa attacking buildings? Like, so those aren't candidates or something like that. It's just totally something else clear off the board.
That's what about it.
But yeah, that drives me crazy. The other one, I got into it
with Kavanaugh. I got a lot of whataboutism talking about Kavanaugh.
Oh yeah.
What about every time it's been a Democrat that has had way more serious allegations and with far more credible allegations? Oh, whataboutism.
Yeah. The other one that they don't understand that I've gotten into several back and forth with is just ad hominem. And they think that like ad hominem has to be like a specific person for a specific insult. And like they say like, oh, that guy's
I can tell you the answer. Ad hominem is power plus privilege.
Yeah, that stuff is like I had one like this person says, don't trust that person. It comes from a right-wing think tank or something like that. Well, that's ad hominem. Like, you're not addressing the argument, you're addressing the think
that was
tank,
that entire that episode of the Young Turks that Quick made it onto. The entire thing was like people decrying the whole BYU race hoax.
Look what right-wing people think about this.
Whoa. Yeah, and then it was Rick Strom like saying, yeah, that guy says it didn't happen, but he was seen eating at the cafe with Dave Rubin, so his opinion's discarded. Yeah, that
I
guy
was
thinks
like-
it doesn't happen, but he voted for Trump. So,
Yeah, like I also just love how unapologetically witch hunty they were. It's like, well, these people applied basic skepticism, so they can't be trusted.
These people
like-
didn't use our age-old method of innocent until proven guilty. We're supposed to do guilty until proven innocent. And yeah, those fallacy things, they'll drive me.
the one I
bonkers.
hear the most is gaslighting. And
Yeah.
the thing is, that one's like really valuable, but people just read it and they're like, okay, so it's when somebody tries to get you to question your own sanity, like, oh, he told me I was wrong, therefore that makes me question my own sanity, therefore
it's
I'm
like-
being gaslit.
That's what I thought. I love the irony of how much gaslighting I've experienced by being told what gaslighting means by jackass leftists.
I wanted to use the term in that thread with Jonathan because they said it seems like the things that you're saying are pretty transphobic. And so then I said, you could call him a transphobe. And they go, I didn't call him a transphobe. And I go, I wanted to say you're gaslighting, but I go, I can't say you're gaslighting because that's
it's a trigger word. Yeah.
But I already know what their answer is. They're gonna say, I said that his comments seem transphobic, not him.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Like that dodge ever works in this world, even though we've seen them try to use that dodge a million times. It's like in that video that we watched of that dude saying systemic racism is real, and usually how they like talk about systemic racism is real. You can never go down that route and not point to that if there was racism, it's because there was racism. And they always try to make it sound like, no, the system can be real racist without any racism in it. No, let's piece this out. If we find the racism, it's because there was a racist person in there, and you're
Plus, it
calling
sounds
that
like
person
systemic-
racist.
Like, if that's the case, then it sounds like systemic racism doesn't matter and isn't a thing that anybody should have to worry about at all. Because if you could just take all of the racist people out of it and no racism happens, but the system is still racist, like, who cares? Because
Systems, not
racism
people.
isn't happening.
It's systems, not people.
But
Just
that's
keep
just
taking
it. Is
them.
every time you break down that lie of a concept, you always break it down to no. You're actually talking about specific people, aren't you? You are not doing that dodge you're pretending to do. Just like when you try to say Jonathan's statements were transphobic, you're not dodging that you're saying Jonathan's transphobic.
Plus, if that's the case, why would we ever cancel anyone? Like, if we criticize systems, not people, then why would we care if the person is fired for doing something terrible? It's not his fault that he did something terrible. It's the system.
Yeah, but that person just said that Jonathan's statements were transphobic, and then said I didn't call Jonathan transphobic. That was gaslighting. And
They have it's basically the exact same dilemma that the like Plan of Salvation presents, and like Christianity, which is that, like, God sent us here to be like perfect, but made us bad to begin with. Like it's that same. Yeah, it's just that. It's that internal conflict, and they live in that constantly, where it's like, it's not systems, it's people, except that the people are the real thing in real life that you're actually interacting with and are doing everything and are creating all the things that you're calling a system.
Flip might remember, but I got in a huge back and forth with a guy on critical race theory who tried to say that like Derek Bell or Kimberly Crenshaw, all those people were super careful to never actually call any person a racist, that they kept it just about systems. And so I went through all these, so I went through all their systems and all their stuff and all those things. And there's all these quotes that are obviously saying that like even the lowest low whitey person is racist and all that sorts of stuff. And
who was the lady that
you can always
white people are devoid of empathy, and people said that's racist? She's like, no, it's not, because of the reasons you're about to explain.
Yeah, it's so funny because like their exact dodge is the fact that they're talking about the group instead of like an individual person. You're like, don't you get that that's always been the complaint about what racism is or isn't, and you're not dodging it by just keeping it at group level. Yeah. It's such
Mexicans
like a lie.
Steal hubcaps. Mexicans steal
that's
hubcaps.
racist.
I didn't say you stole hubcaps.
I said systemically,
Systemically
Mexicans steal hubcaps.
Go tell your girlfriend.
Remember when that was an actual thing? I guess that's basically gone now, huh? Because
Yeah,
you either have aftermarket alloy wheels, or you have cheap factory hubcaps. Because I guess I'm old enough to remember when people still worried about having their hubcaps stolen.
Yeah.
Go tell your girlfriend you're acting like a huge bitch, and when she gets mad at you and later says you called me a bitch, say I didn't say you were a bitch. I said you were acting like a bitch, and then tell me like how well.
Yeah.
Because here's some whataboutism again. I'm using
Yeah.
this circumstance to to sort of explain that. Because you explain that situation to an ex-Mormon, they're going to be like, you're an abusive asshole who is gaslighting her. But then they'll take that exact same principle and turn it around on you and be like, you're saying transphobic things. I didn't call you transphobic.
Well, yeah, that exact person, I could have said, everything you just said is stupid and for idiots. And she could have said, did you just call me
And they'll do the
stupid?
reverse.
And the things I say are idiotic. I'm like, no. I said the things you said were the stupid things. And so dumb. And then the thing is, like, if you argue with that type, I've said for a long time that all they become is kind of professional sand throwers. They get really good at ways to throw sand in the eyes and obfuscate and never actually talk about a subject, and you just get windy into the bull crap. The same guy was there throwing his gish gallops out about all the terrible things in the world that are going on, and here's somebody worried about the trans issue, as if that's one of the main things that they always try to do too, is like the trans issue, why are you even talking about this? Why is this even on your mind, man? Why are you even thinking about this? It's not even a thing, man. Even though me and my kids are doing this and in this 24/7, putting our flags up about it 24/7, talking to your kids about it 24/7. Why do you care about this so much, man?
Literally, how does this even affect you?
You know what's funny? Like, have you noticed that, like, I mean, because there's a lot of spaces. I hate what has happened to that word.
I know.
There's a lot of spaces that ostensibly you are not allowed to display political imagery, but the pride flag.
Yeah, no, I saw somebody
everywhere.
I saw somebody on Reddit. It was the LGBT Reddit talking about how terrible it is because my school banned the pride flag, and everybody's talking about how bigoted and terrible that is. And that's one of those things that if you take it down the hole and try to go back and forth with somebody over should they be allowed to display pride flags, and you say, well, they're not allowed to display other political symbols, they would then tell you that, well, it's not political. Children are dying.
This is our life, man. This is just the base level life and stuff.
My kid will kill himself if you don't let him bring a pride flag to school. Like, okay, well, maybe if that's true, and the thing that barely gets your kid from killing himself is being able to take a pride flag to school, like maybe there's some bigger problems.
Yeah, this on the Thoughtful Saints, that's a Jacob Hansen's site. There was just some guy in there admonishing them all today, saying, I feel like you guys you don't talk about trans issues enough here in your Mormon little page, and if you do, it's in a derogatory manner. Just give me the generality of it.
Because I was thinking about do the obvious thing, and then I realized, like, oh no, wait, this is like I don't know. Sorry, I'm going on a major tangent here, but like I just had the thought of, like, why don't the Southerners just say, let me wave the stars and bars or I'll kill myself? And of course the answer would come back, go ahead and kill yourself. We fucking hate you.
We aren't worried about that suicide.
You know? And
that's what we've been hoping for.
And my mind flashed back to Sam Harris talking about on his thing about why I don't criticize Israel, you know, where like, because like when an Israeli missile strike kills Palestinian children, it's a tragedy. And Israel, you know, I mean, as much as they can apologize, they don't apologize for obvious reasons. But like, whereas like, you know, if you ask the reverse, like, you know, because the thing is, we know that Palestinians use children as shields. We know they do that. And then like, and Sam Harris, like, you know, it's farcical to imagine like the reverse. Like, what if the Israelis used little Jewish children as shields for Hamas? That's the point. Like, perfect, you know? And so I decided, like, this exact hypocrisy where it's like, you know, let me express myself or I'll kill myself. They don't really mean that. Like, let me express the right ideas or I'll kill myself. You know, that's what they mean. But like,
well, if they keep
let me express the wrong ideas or I'll kill myself, fine. Let die.
Well, that's what the transgender movement has figured out how to hold themselves hostage. That's like most of what they do. Anytime you get in an argument with people, you are literally killing people. I haven't watched that dude's channel. I don't really know much about this guy. He's an Australian. He does some man in the street videos. He did the "What is a woman?" question in the street. And a guy comes down there and is like, "Will you think about all the people that you personally are killing with this rhetoric?" Okay,
Exactly.
like what other group of people holds themselves hostage? And when they do hold themselves hostage, when individuals do this in relationships, they are mentally ill, and you have to, like, everyone will tell you get away from him. If you have a boyfriend that's like, I don't know what to do. My boyfriend says he's going to kill himself if I leave him. Like, what is anybody going to tell you to do? Like, leave him. That guy's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, this Anthony Miller guy on that same Thoughtful Saints thing. Like I said, Thoughtful Saints, Latter-day Lobsters, all these different groups we see that are ostensibly Mormon, even their own side, people who come in and say, "I don't think we talk about the trans and the gays enough, and I think we should talk about it. And if you do talk about it, it's in a derogatory manner." And every single week, I feel like I see another post up there of them saying, "Stop and think of the gays." And even if you're just doing something else and that's not really the thing. Here, let me show you this Family Guy clip that's been going around. I know we don't think Family Guy is particularly that funny usually, but this one's a good one. Have you seen this one?
25 years old.
Look at
I've
this.
seen this one. Yeah, this one. It's amazing.
They did some good stuff for trans things. Yeah, they did some good
Excuse me,
satire, I
ma'am.
should say.
Excuse me, ma'am. No porn at the bar.
Oh, it's okay. I'm transgender.
Oh, I had no idea. Do whatever you want all the time.
Excuse
Yeah, that's pretty close. And again, it creeps me out to watch that South Park episode from the mid 2000s, where it's one of the Mr. Garrison episodes where like they were 10 years at
Well,
least
yeah.
ahead. Where
I wouldn't even
saw
guess.
that's exactly how that happened. Where they're like, "Oh no, just go ahead, do whatever you want, Mr. Garrison. It's okay. You're gay."
And maybe
Good
they
job.
saw it in Colorado before I saw it or something, but I had no idea when Mr. Garrison stuff first started coming on that was actually going to be a political issue. I had no clue that's where that was going.
Yeah, they were way ahead. I really like the episode with the one about the Yowie, where they
Yeah, the
learn
Tweak
that
and Craig one.
Asians decide who's gay. But just the whole thing where like the parents, like every time they find out that a kid's gay, they're just like, "Here's some money.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. Here's some money."
Yeah.
Which like I really think, obviously, I think it's like because those guys are in LA, and I think they're just looking at like the corporate donation thing of like, "Oh yeah, here's some money."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Anthony, we haven't watched this yet. Maybe we'll watch it. Maybe we'll watch a little bit right now. But just right off the bat, I doubt you've listened to all our stuff, but I don't know if you listen to this either, even though you asked me to review it. But I don't like the term deconstruction. I'm not a fan of that term. I know that Mormons have kind of co-opted it into their own thing, and all sorts of people in the ex-Mormon. I think ex-Mormons do it more than typical. I don't know. I've seen some of it in Christian world too, but they use that
Are you
term
playing some
deconstruction. I haven't watched any of it. He just barely sent it to me, but we also might have.
Oh, this thing? Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's let me see if he asked us to review
I'm
it.
gonna be on listen mode, doing preparing food. I'm making dinner, but
Yeah, in just a minute, we might have Marty jump on too.
Cool.
Let's see.
And what is there any value in deconstructing things? So
What do you mean by deconstructing things? I know what you mean. I know that you mean falsifying or undoing your religious upbringing or something like that. But the term deconstruction to me always came from Derrida, and way ex-Mormons or post-religious people use it. Even I guess even Derrida would say like all those words evolve and whatever. But deconstruction is about removing all meaning of even just the words that you're saying to each other. So we can't even communicate with each other right here about what any of us are doing. We're just talking past each other. That's what real deconstruction is.
I have to I have to kind of bite my tongue whenever I hear the word deconstruction in an ex-Mormon sense, and I have to translate it in my brain to what they mean, and like
it's like
what they
defacing.
mean is to falsify, kind of like you said, which that's how we come up with ideas. That's how you refine ideas, is that you have your hunch and then you do everything you can to falsify it, and that's great. But it kind of actually, in the ex-Mormon world, devolves from, at some point it goes from falsification to actual like Derridian deconstructionism, because a lot of them get into, without even knowing that they do, get into like the queer theory stuff and start deconstructing things like gender or race or sexuality to the point where it's meaningless.
Yeah, well, that's why I'd say deconstruction, the term is, I mean, it's a little bit more, but like the actual Derridian term is even way farther than just undoing the constructs of what you grew up with. That's kind of more Foucauldian than deconstruction. But when we say, look, we got Marti on.
Mm-hmm.
How's
Might
it
be a
going?
mistake.
It might be a mistake for you or for us.
Huh?
For you or for us?
I don't know. For me.
No, we're not. Marti doesn't condone any of the stuff that we've said up to this point. We've said a lot of really horrible, terrible things about everybody.
Yeah, give me a summary.
Well,
That
Chris
was-
was just explaining to us about how the Jews did 9/11. We assume you agree with that, since we're all alt-right.
You're
QAnon.
now part of this. Yeah. No, up to this point, we've been talking. Well, gosh, we kind of covered a gambit of stuff already, but we first talked about grad school and how they kind of teach this general way of critical theory to stuff. And we went over a video of a guy. Do you know who Dan McClellan is? Have you watched any of the Dan McClellan stuff?
Yeah, I think because of you guys, though. I
'Cause
don't
of
know that
us?
yeah.
So we found a guy who copies Dan McClellan to address stuff about superheroes on TikTok, but he exactly
He's a doctorate,
copies Dan McClellan.
okay? He has a
He's a
doctorate in
doctorate.
comic books, all right?
Yeah.
So address him accordingly.
So then we started talking about that, and we looked at how he actually talks like the guy and how they break the stuff down. It was more on this, the way they use critical theory to, have an activism rather than just breaking down truth. And then we got into logical fallacies. Am I missing anything? We got into logical fallacies and how a lot of times people's logical fallacies aren't logical fallacies. Like, people aren't very good at diagnosing logical fallacies.
I'm terrible at that logic stuff. Like, and I honestly, the writer
Makes sense 'cause
justifies
you're
the
a girl.
well, the writer justifies the elephant, and that's how I see everything. So it's like we have really good lawyers, and it doesn't mean the person's innocent or your idea is innocent, right? Like, I don't know. Just a minute.
And Flip just jump in long enough.
Flip just jumped in long enough to
asshole and
be.
then went back to doing his dinner.
Yeah, well, I think lawyers. Scott Adams said the United States will ultimately die, and it will be thanks to lawyers. And I think he's somewhat right about that in the sense of lawyers. Lawyers were actually really the first place critical theory picked up in academics with. That's why Kimberly Crenshaw comes out of that. And that's because in the world of lawyer, you're just almost kind of playing the Foucauldian power game. You're just trying to power win with your argument. You don't care if you're getting at truth. And I don't know if there was ever a point in time where the courts were everybody's just there to get after truth. The lawyer on each side is just supposed to win and make whatever arguments it takes to win. And maybe sometimes that is appealing to logic, but other times it's, appealing to
It exploits logic a lot of times.
Exploits logic. It appeals to emotion as much as ever. And then, any lawyer, a lot of the Trump era stuff where I cut my teeth arguing with guys, I think Flip saw a lot of this, I was arguing with lawyers. I was arguing with lawyers because lawyers, most lawyers that I've come across are just as much as anywhere. Of course, it's not all of them, but lawyers, almost all that I know, bend a certain way themselves. You can argue till the end of time with them, but then a lot of the fallacies and the arguments and the playing by the rules goes out the wayside when you're arguing with them. But
my cousin is a family law lawyer, and he publishes like blogs and stuff. And
he's pretty okay, though, isn't he?
Yeah, no, but it's just because talking to him just is so terrifying. Because basically he's like there's no honesty. There's like justice is very low on the list of priorities. The courts are like, it just the way he describes it, it's nothing like that Perry Mason ideal that we always wish is true. And I think the courts are generally pretty bad. I think the family law courts are a special kind of bad. But yeah.
Well, I listen to podcasts of several different lawyers, and the thing that's so funny to me is like some of them can be just the best in the world about breaking down logic and that sort of stuff. But then when you hear them actually have to talk about a situation where they are actually the lawyer of a person, you can hear the lying advocate come out in a split second.
Yeah.
There's the dude who Corolla always has on, Garagos or whatever. He comes on
Yeah.
he comes down on to break down other things going around the country. When he's breaking down other people's cases, he's great at breaking down all the details and all the reasons. Well, it turns out he's also Jussie Smollett's lawyer. So you can hear this guy just be the most rational person to help you understand random cases from around the country. But then the Jussie Smollett thing comes up, and then just listen to him go off the rails, and there's no logic there for a second. He's just
Maybe Rachel Richardson should find that guy.
well, if you wanted a lawyer, if you saw him do that, you'd be like, well, I want that guy on my side because he's willing to do it. I've seen the same thing. I listen to Robert Barnes's podcast. He's a lawyer and he's really, really good. But then suddenly, when it's one of his guys that you're on, he'll make whatever argument in the world for him. I've seen Dershowitz do it, but that's what lawyers do. It's kind of expert in sophistry. And Kimberly Crenshaw first started seeing, and there's a reason that critical race theory came out of critical legal studies, and they found out that they could use those arguments well in court cases to win arguments, to win money out of those court cases. Because you can talk about systemic racism and that might work on a jury of peers better than it works on somebody who's, dissecting whether or not your logic was great or not.
O.J. Simpson, anyone?
Yeah. But Marty, this is Anthony Miller's new podcast.
She does the Almost Awakened podcast, right?
I don't know her.
He just sent Brittany Hartley. Doesn't she do Bill Rose? I think, yeah.
I don't know. She's new to me.
So he sent it over saying he wanted a mix of reviews from it. He even mentioned your name I don't know if he messaged you directly. But
no, I didn't see it.
I know that this podcast, this world that he's in, he's trying to be the place where a lot of different political angles can come and meet inside the same spot.
Estuary?
Maybe an estuary from Paul Vanderklay. Nice. You've been listening to Vanderklay.
I've been listening to Digital Gnosis.
Oh yeah,
and
because you've been
has a really hard time with Paul Vanderklay and John Vervaeke and Jordan Peterson. He just dislikes that line of thinking. He thinks it's them preying on vulnerable people and trying to get money, and
trying to enforce monogamy.
Yeah, he just thinks.
What are the chances the person you're talking to gave money to Black Lives Matter?
Well, he's in I think it might be Scotland. He's across the ocean.
Yeah. She's been talking with him. I've listened to some of them, how he goes over it. You can basically say he doesn't like Neoplatonism.
Yeah, for sure.
Sense.
He's like a materialist, like a really.
He's a hardcore materialist who gets very, very worried about trans issues. Like he's hardcore. That's usually what the right at the pressure point where you'll start looking at him, because that's one of the first things we were starting to talk about on here is when activism and truth kind of start fighting with each other, and there's not anything that where you can find somebody as soon as they start caring about something, they have like an angle on something, they start fudging with reality or are willing to fudge with reality as soon as you pressure them on it.
That's why I will not join activism of any kind. Like there are even things I care about, but I will not call myself an activist about those things, and I don't give money to any groups, and I don't walk around with any signs. I just won't drop. That's a line I won't cross into activism. I'll just talk to people about what I think.
And you got to be careful with lobbing out those accusations of materialism, because John Larson will think you're talking about being a material girl.
Well, I mean, I think I'll even back up that guy, because I mean, I declare myself an atheist or whatever. Marty's brother always wants more nuanced about that, but I just say it to kind of get clear the angles that I try to argue from. But I give leeway to Peterson and Vanderklay's and Pageau's Christianity, and you could say I have an activism, not necessarily an activism, but like I have a preference for that. So I do let them get away with some stuff that's if you're some hardcore autistic atheist, you'd be like, "No, come on with that right there." The thing that you're saying, you'd rip it apart or shred it up. But the thing is everybody does that for the thing that they hold dear. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, going back to Jonathan Haidt and the righteous mind and all that stuff, everybody forgives the thing that they're rooting for, and gets hardcore logical positivists, dissect them, Wittgenstein. We're going to break you down exactly for the thing that they don't like. And that's what I see in that guy. He's very, very sure that he can, rip apart logically everything that he doesn't like, but the things that he likes or he believes in, he's not going to take a hammer to it, at least not yet.
Yeah. Nathan, it's not that I don't have that same skepticism. Like I don't dogpile on him too much because I still have that same, I don't know, because there are people that probably join Christianity because of stuff that Jordan Peterson said. In fact, Nathan is one of them. And so he's like, anyway, he jumped right in, and then he thinks he was brainwashed and stuff. It was some form
because of where he went.
Christianity. Yeah. And I don't know, I sympathize with that a little bit, but
I sympathize with it. Do you know who else I sympathize with? I sympathize with MGTOW guys. MGTOW guys who get real mad when Jordan Peterson told them to trust in a woman, and then they go and have a bad experience with a woman, and then they come back and go, "Oh, all women are bad now," because that's the thing that Peterson must have just been bad for telling them to give women a chance or something like that. It's a little bit kind of the same thing in my view, in the sense of, and that's the argument you see from MGTOW or even incel types, is that it's more MGTOW, because MGTOW are guys who got burnt, like incel are guys who,
going their own way. Is that?
Yeah. So,
Okay,
MGTOW guys are guys who are successful with women, but they got burnt by women. So they're saying don't stay away from it for forever. And the truth of it is a lot of them did get burnt, but Peterson might give them the advice of don't just stay forever burnt on that because of that one situation. And I think it's kind of a bit of a parallel thing that guy chose a dumb church and got ripped apart by it, or got whatever by it. And so now he's going after Peterson. To me, it's any MGTOW that you can see MGTOW people who got mad at the person who told them to go try to give a woman a chance and get married. No, she divorced me and took my money. That's on Peterson.
Well, yeah, be a better chooser, I guess. But we were talking about ACAB earlier, and when I think of that, like I think of my favorite thing to compare it to is probably in MGTOW message boards, because I've seen them. I think that subreddit's closed down now, but I went there and I noticed like every subreddit has just a irritating number of acronyms that you have to memorize. It's dumb bullshit. It's annoying, but in the MGTOW subreddit, they had one that was AWALT, AWALT, and it's all women are like that. And they would just say, like, they would, they'd take a shitty thing that a woman did to them, and they would say, all of them are like this. And they would get angry at any of their members who said, well, maybe not all women are like that. And they turn on them. I don't know. It feels like anytime you have kind of an ideology telling you that any group is bad, you should probably tilt your head a little bit. And they don't even flinch, the people who do that. Like, because if you were to bring that all women are like this philosophy to mainstream knowledge, they'd immediately dismiss it and be like, no, fuck you, that's a sexist idea. But you bring all cops are bastards to mainstream knowledge, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that.
I really do sympathize with the MGTOW guys. Like, a lot of them really have been burned by a terrible
dating
person.
would be a nightmare right now.
Yeah. And I really do sympathize with every person who ever had a super terrible experience in a religion. I 100% do. And but there gets to be like such extreme levels of like, now I must burn it all down, become an anti-theist and all that stuff. And a lot of it's usually just maybe you're over extrapolating from your singular experience, which I'm not taken away from. But that's how I see that guy a little bit. Although he's a pretty smart dude as far as like having read up on Neoplatonism and Plato and I know he's talking to you about what was it, nominalism, and there's so much in that stuff that has to do with perception and dualism and that sort of stuff. And I sympathize with Platonists or whatever, the people who Nietzsche ripped apart, because he kind of thinks that all that stuff through Kant on down was basically kind of redoing religion in the philosophical realm. And it kind of is. And that's it is. And that's been a bit of a lot of my critiques of what a lot of the people who get into ex-Mormonism or atheism and that sort of stuff, that they join into these philosophies that if you really break them down and look at it, they really do have religious claims at the root of them as well. The problem is like, I think even Wittgenstein gets kind of religious down at the bottom of it, and he'll point to Wittgenstein or Bertrand Russell, who are just hardcore logic, math, logic. And if you go far enough deep into their stuff that they kind of wrote out and spelled out, like Wittgenstein gets as nutty as anybody because he does all these mathematical equations trying to fix Derrida before Derrida, if that makes sense. Like he does all these mathematical equations trying to make all the words in the world make 100% sense to this thing and that thing and that thing. If you ever like looked at his math into that stuff, it gets wild. Late Wittgenstein even got off of that idea a little bit himself. He later came back and said, "Oh, I'm going to chill out on these guys." But
Yeah, he has a critique on James Lindsay and something about Christian nationalism. So maybe that would be worth watching sometime. And
because he joined
nationalism.
I was
because
trying.
he joins up with Michael O'Fallon.
I
I've
was
got
trying.
critiques of James Lindsay, but I wouldn't put anything to do with Christian nationalism on
So
there.
I was okay. So I watched a video he put out like 3 days ago, and then I sent him an email, and I was like, "Hey, maybe we could do a podcast thing," because I was thinking, okay, where will you go? That's like my whole podcast, right? And you kind of go into this like, okay, if this story that I've been living my whole life isn't true, then where do I go? Like, what is, it's totally disorienting to have a collapse of belief. So anyway, and people do get into the philosophy stuff. Some people, not everybody, but I did. And so I was like, it's relevant. So I was thinking, okay, he has critiques of like Stephen Hicks. He thinks that Stephen Hicks misunderstands. He thinks Stephen Hicks misunderstands postmodernism.
Yeah, because he watched the Cuck Philosophy video that he thinks broke it down. I know where the whole backstory of all those people who think
Oh, yeah?
broke it down. Yeah.
So he thinks that he's misunderstanding it. And I was like, okay, let's I'll let him try to explain that. And then I haven't read all the stuff. And I was like, hey, I have someone that has read that stuff. I was thinking of Chris. And I was like, let's do like a podcast. And I wanted him to meet you first. So I was like, I just want to like have us meet first. And anyway, he's like, I'm not sure if I have time for that. So I don't know. Maybe he'll do it. Maybe he won't. But I think he's mad at me I think he thinks I'm being antagonistic or something because I am.
Doesn't he
pushing
call
him.
for antagonism? This is
I'm
the
criticizing
Wittgenstein
him.
math. Look
Well,
at this stuff. This is how you
sorry.
make Derrida right, correct? Or something. you get the logical analysis. You can break down every single word. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think you have to have like a better ratio because I think lately I've been only criticizing him, and it's the same thing. And so if you're only criticizing, then I don't know, it's just not going to look good on like perception, right? So, and I think he does some stuff right. I don't have a problem with all of his thinking. I just don't understand why he has such a hard time with, like, I would say John Vervaeke is trying to get people to a place where they can honestly make meaning in their life without having to believe something that's not scientific. To me, that seems like a good goal. Like, I don't know why he has such a problem with that. So
he just doesn't like the Neoplatonism, which that Neoplatonism does kind of go back to the concept of, instead of God, Neoplatonism puts kind of like the one there. It's a little bit like that Tawhid stuff that Flip was talking about with the Islam, is that there still is kind of like a prime starter of the universe at the bottom end of it, where all assertions come off of.
I just don't think that's what John Vervaeke thinks, though. Like, I think there is no like ultimate meaning. I just listened to his interview on Lex Friedman. Did you guys watch that at all? No.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So he states pretty clearly in there that he's basically a materialist, but he just thinks that it's good to have practices in your life to try to gain wisdom. But I mean, that's the basis of his I don't know what he's trying to sell. I don't know if that's
I mean, because he's first off, I know that your guy criticizes those guys even saying that there's a meaning crisis at all.
Right.
And I think that's pretty apparent that there's a meaning crisis. I just 100% don't agree that there isn't no meaning crisis, or doing the sources, please. What are your sources for this?
No, I asked him that. And the way he described it was he doesn't like how it's all looped together as one big problem. He's like, okay, if there is a suicide problem, let's address the suicide problem and try to fix that. If there is another problem, let's address that. Why is it all related? He doesn't like the grand narrative that it's all related and all one big meaning crisis. That's what he doesn't like. He's just like, let's just be practical about it and solve each
Does somebody say that it's all, or just that?
John
is it
Vervaeke
just enough
makes
to say
the claim that they're. I mean, that's why people are committing suicide, and that's why, like, I don't know. I don't think
Yeah,
that's
his whole series is
It'd be
called
pretty
The Means,
easy
right?
to make that case that people are committing more suicide because of a purpose crisis, because suicide is such a first world problem. It's like we do it
So-
more often than people than I don't know, Jews in the Holocaust didn't kill themselves as much as a lot of different demographics that people do now.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is that weird thing. Anthony Bourdain killed himself. He's like, wow.
Yeah.
So John Vervaeke is a self-proclaimed or described Neoplatonist, although there's a lot of different flavors of that. But what the Platonism looks at is, it has the stuff. It always goes back to one. We've talked about this before. Is like it's basically getting all the way back to axioms, and the axiom at the very bottom is basically kind of the same thing as thinking that there's some sort of like universal rule to the universe that we can't exactly quite grasp it or know what it is or something like that. But in Platonism, you could call it a god or something like that, or it's not a god. It could just be the one. But the thing is, like, you don't have to believe that this one is a being or an entity or any sort of thing like that. Does that make sense? It's just like, it's just the root axiom, and the root axiom of any, I don't know, given field or something like that. But it's basically saying the rules at the core of the universe that are just true. It's bottom level truth where we start from, the assertion, the initial assertion. Like Jacob Hansen will say, you atheists can't say that there's any truth in the world because you don't have an assertion to jump off of, and our assertion to jump off of is God. And you guys can only be Foucauldian. You can only be who's to say, what's to say, who's to say, what's to say.
power,
There's no-
power.
Yeah. I think Vervaeke does a good job of, so Peterson kind of tries to describe it, but he holds on to the Judeo-Christian perception of it. And Judeo-Christianity even kind of blended in a bunch of Neoplatonism into it, through Plato and the Greeks and all that sorts of stuff over time. But Vervaeke is rescuing all that and saying, I can rescue all that and I don't have to believe there's a being actually there. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh yeah, like he would say that personal God was developed more recently, that the more original term of God would maybe be closer to what he thinks could
What
be
Islam
reality.
is, Flip described it. That's kind of how Islam sees what God is. How do you describe Islam's God, Flip? It's like a
Well, there's a Tawheed is like the oneness, because like there's that whole idea. But I don't remember how we brought it up before. But like, like part of the reason that it's not that it's against the rules to depict God in Islam. I mean, it is against the rules to depict God in Islam, but it's beyond that. It's like it's impossible to even attempt to do such a thing because God is the one thing that is the one thing behind everything. And there's no dividing God. God has no partners, and there's nothing above God or below God or around God, and it's all that extremely, because it is a little different because Jews, Mormons have a very personal God. Christians have a fairly personal God, but even that idea like of like in the Bible where it talks about like God walking with Adam, like even as like a
I think he
Did I
just
lose him?
stopped talking.
It's a really great point,
frozen
Flip.
place.
Yeah. That's,
you
you froze.
flashed out, Flip, for a second.
I don't know where I left off, but I was saying something about, so like in Islam, because there's a personal God in Christianity. Mormonism has an extremely personal God. Like, so in like the book of Genesis where it says like God walked with Adam. In Islam, like that's blasphemy to even as a metaphor. The idea that God can have legs and walk around and that, like, it's this whole library is obviously in Islamic thought talking about this concept of Tawheed. Because that's things like, this whole argument, when people make like, well, we point to God, and it's like, because I have the problem, like, and maybe I'm just doing Foucauldian deconstruction. Like, well, I mean, aren't you just saying so? Like ultimately we're all in the same boat as to where we're getting our foundations from, because eventually we all just say, well, I guess it's that thing, and I'm taking it on faith. I don't know.
Well, that's one of the areas where Peterson gets into I've mentioned before, the new pragmatists, and the new pragmatists kind of point to the concept of evolution and Darwinism being the thing that answers those questions, because who's to say, what's to say? Survival is what's to say, and thrival and continuing to survive and exist is what's to say, is their answer to that. But and then they point out that certain types of religious paradigms do better at that than atheistic ones, even if atheistic ones are more empirically true. Like we
I
know
struggle with that.
with the empirically true stuff.
No, I struggle with the idea that like a useful lie, like a useful fiction, like I don't know, I struggle
Yeah.
with that.
Well, so we went through this before, and that's a concept that I always struggle with too, because like you come out of the church, and one of those quotes that you hear all the time is, I think it was Packer.
Yeah,
said,
from the
"Not all
mantle is far
truths-"
greater than intellect. Yeah, that talk
not all
is
truths
where
are
I
useful.
wanted to, like, I was really mad after I read that talk. And it's the whole talk. It's not just that quote. The whole
Yeah.
talk is just terrible. And I go, oh, this is why this is new to me as I'm reading Saints. Like this is why this is all new to me, is because they
weren't
told
useful.
not. Yeah, well, they were told not to tell me the whole story, the whole.
So this whole episode with Douglas Murray and Jonathan Pajau, because Douglas Murray is an atheist and holds on to atheists, but then he was also a big follower of Roger Scruton, and Roger Scruton is one of the guys I point to as somebody who really kind of pushed or advanced or made understandable a lot of a conservative thought. But him as an atheist gay guy, he says this.
In the words of the creed, that you believe in the virgin birth, that you believe, most importantly, in the resurrection. Many of us can walk 99% of the way there in terms of belief in the truth of the story, or as Betjeman puts it, but is it true? Is it true? And then stumble on the last thing.
And that's what they go into in that whole entire thing right there. And I think that's a little bit of where I am too. But usually when I start talking about pragmatics versus empirical truth, some of that is stuff that, like we talked before about the porcupine thing, if people stayed away from porcupines better when they thought they could throw their quills, and that turned out to be a pragmatic lie, because people got closer to porcupines when they knew that they didn't throw their quills. But it's just not true that they don't throw their quills. And there's part of it, like we said, I think like once the cat's out of the bag on a thing, you can't put it back in the bag.
Yeah.
But part of my deal is that I think there's a lot of things that we don't really have the cat out of the bag on, especially when it comes to long-term trajectory of civilizations. Does that make sense?
That's fair, but I just need people to say that, right? Like I need them.
And Peterson won't. Yeah.
And I need them to say, we don't know, I don't know, and not try to go, well, when we don't fully believe, things fall apart, therefore we're going to keep on. Like, it actually hinders you from solving the actual problem. Like, I think John Vervaeke is actually trying to solve the problem, where I would say, like, people that are not willing to let go, like Jacob Hansen, for example, he's not helping the situation. Like, people are going to come to the conclusion that Joseph Smith didn't actually see physical gold plates, right? Like that's just, they're going to stop believing that those kinds of claims, and he's not helping the situation. That's not a believable story. It's not the fault of people believing that that's not a believable story, if that makes sense. And I feel like John Vervaeke is trying to give a believable story, but also I still have reservations. Like, I'm like, I don't want to get stuck in another, I don't know. I don't want to be, I want to be able to be on my own, but I kind of wonder if you can actually become wise without having like people around you trust that are like, hey, I think you're thinking wrong about that. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think Vervaeke does do a good job of bringing into the atheistic realm of how you could rescue some of the, Peterson would call it Christianity. Vervaeke would shy off of calling it Christianity, but it's Neoplatonism. It's just Western paradigms of belief. And I saw somebody describe that, like, you have Western versus Eastern, and Western is all top down. Like you have this ideal at the top, there's an ideal that you aim towards, whereas Eastern kind of comes from the ground and the bottom and like a meditation up, and it's like they're kind of like opposite directions. But you always notice like Vervaeke and Pajau, they're always doing big swirly hand motions like this and talking about that stuff, because your environment and how you perceive things and how everything's understood and what you're aiming at, and even how you concoct the world, it all becomes part of it. And that's why Peterson always usually gets into that. And I think that's usually overlooked by people who want to get to hardcore materialism, because they think that they just stopped and started viewing everything as the universe exactly as it is, and they see it all autistically. I use the word autistically very intentionally. Like I in some sort of sense, it's like, I think sometimes when you take mushrooms, what's going on when you're taking mushrooms is you're losing the filter. And so you're taking in too much more. You're taking in more than you're supposed to be taking in. And you don't realize that the world's filtering out stuff and making it so you can focus on a thing and not have every piece of light or piece of shining whatever coming at you all at once. And
Did we get on a topic of mushrooms without like criticizing Cara Burrell? Is that what just happened? Because that's usually.
yeah,
I was
well,
tripping on mushrooms the other day. I was deconstructing everything that I've ever known about my life and making a lot of really funny jokes because I'm hilarious.
so the point that
I watched her today, and she talked about her background as a comedian. She talked about using her background as a comedian to bring lulz to people. I was like,
To bring what to people?
lulz.
Oh, LOL.
Well, which I
Yeah.
also thought, like, I thought that was weird because I thought lulz, LULZ, had become 4chan language.
Yeah, I did it for the lulz.
Because like that's
Or
it's become
lul-
That's how you
cow.
get Sam Hyde.
exactly.
She's probably part of QAnon. That makes sense.
Well, it's
We
all
caught
together,
her.
come together.
Yeah, we for sure caught her. I don't know. All that stuff. I mean, I guess that's getting a little esoteric in the arguments with that dude when we could be talking about other stuff. But I don't think anybody's going to land on any sort of answers. But what I do think Vervaeke does a good job of is saying, hey, you can understand where the people who believe stuff are coming from and get along with them and even accept and leave them to their understandings and not get upset if somebody else does believe in gold plates or something like that. And then in some sort of way, rescue Western philosophy and how we understand stuff in that realm and not just throw it all away and fall into Nietzschean power games.
So I guess my question would be that, like, because you're talking about this in terms of like, oh, the cat's out of the bag. And I asked you last time if you thought we should, like, if you thought it was wrong to try to put the cat back in the bag. And I'm pretty sure you said, yeah, that we shouldn't try to put the cat back in the bag. We shouldn't go and tell people that, no, porcupines really can throw their quills or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It kind of feels like that if you have, what I worry about is if you have this sort of idea that like there are things that are pragmatically true, there's going to be people who are trying to pull the cat out of the bag, and that those people have sort of a loyalty to literal truth. And I always feel myself leaning toward that because, like, would it be then, like, if the pragmatic truths are important, would it then be excusable to try to dissuade people from pulling the cat out of the bag?
I think it all depends on, because I lean that way too myself. Of course, I mean that's half of what we're doing here is pulling people out of their cultish fantasies and stuff if they just haven't like seen like the truth on some sort of issue. I lean that way 100% myself. Like it's gotta. I can't go around pretending to believe stuff that I don't.
I don't think I could. I have a hard time. Like, I wouldn't feel like I had integrity if I did that. But what I am willing to do is say I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this cat being out of the bag. Like maybe I thought the cat's out of the bag and maybe I'm looking at it wrong, right? Like I could be wrong. Like I'm willing to do that, but I'm not willing to like purposefully be like, you can't unsee this thing. Like, and so I want you to keep having fun around Christmas time. So I'm going to keep like helping you believe that Santa Claus is real. Like I'm not willing to do that. If that makes sense.
So,
but this isn't a Santa Claus thing. This is a different thing that I think I could be wrong about. I genuinely think I could be wrong. Not
Well,
that
kind of
like the church could be
math
true.
things, right?
Not that the church could be true. Like I don't think the way I used to think it was true, it could be, but it could be that there's like this third option I'm completely unaware of that is closer, and the church being true is closer to that than what I'm thinking right now is closer to that third thing that we don't know about yet, if that makes sense.
I think the church.
That's the third thing.
I think the church was pragmatically very viable through a rough time period in Western United States. And I think it could be in the future, but I think it slips into stuff that it could run itself right off the map, just like anything else could. But that guy saying James Lindsay's attached to what Christian nationalism is because James Lindsay does these different seminars with Michael O'Fallon. This guy, that's why I sent it to you earlier from Sovereign
Here,
Nation.
I'll be right back. I gotta go lift some children for my crippled wife.
Children.
All right. So Michael Fallon, guys like your friend will knee-jerk reaction because they've heard somewhere on the internet, whoa, they're Christian nationalists. You know, he's some Christian guy who believes in, well, I sent these to you because this is Michael O'Fallon, who Michael O'Fallon's finally become aware of, because he's been very, very critical of the leftist Hegelians, he's finally become aware of the right-wing Hegelians, which those are the guys that I also criticize. Those are the guys saying we can pretend like we believe. We can do this. We can pretend like we can believe, and we can make a monarchy and a Christian, like those actual guys like that. Those are the pomo trads that I talk about, and it's not actual believers. So Michael O'Fallon finally became aware of these pomo trad guys, and he's talking about it here. Here's him. Christian nationalism is a worthy endeavor if your intentions are to evangelize the lost, proclaim the gospel, and put men who value truth in office. It is not a worthy endeavor if your intentions are to dissolve the Constitution and replace it with a new social contract. This is the guy that guy thinks means James Lindsay's a Christian nationalist. These are actual guys who are trying to protect the Constitution and all of its constitutional rights within it. So this is him noticing all of those pomo trads. There's a bunch of ambitious young men are willing to advocate for the overflow of the United States and install a religiously based monarchy that is a cog in the wheel of the supranational totalitarian collective world order. So this is the guy that he thinks makes James Lindsay a Christian nationalist, coming out after the actual Christian nationalists. If your intentions are to motivate the base of theonomy-minded Christians across the nation, sooner or later they will figure out that they make up less than 1/10 of 1% of the population, and their movement will not be embraced by most Christians. And along with the wayward movement, you enlist the theological fraud that is Moeller, then don't expect to have the vast majority of the pro-gospel anti-woke coming along with you. But then again, that was never your intention. Your intentions are to create division in the previously unified group and create entryism that pushes out honest voices, engulfs possible opponents, and raises. This is him talking to the Christian nationalists. And this is the guy that guy there thinks makes James Lindsay a Christian nationalist, because he heard it on some sort of Media Matters place. The same thing with that Stephen Hicks thing. There was a whole video by Cuck Philosophy saying Stephen Hicks doesn't understand postmodernism, and I think Cuck Philosophy doesn't understand postmodernism. They all go to that same video to talk about it. But that video, I was the one who showed Cuck Philosophy Stephen Hicks. So that goes all the way back years and years and years. And it became a very big, huge video. And then he criticized Stephen Hicks. And they say stuff like, Stephen Hicks doesn't understand postmodernism because he calls Kant a postmodernist. Stephen Hicks is right and they're wrong. The general people aren't going to call Kant a postmodernist, but if you read Lyotard or any one of those people, they jump off of Kant big time and hardcore. And why? Because Kant was the first guy who, because of religious reasons, started trying to separate like material reality from this secondary land of the noumenon, as he called it, this second world of we can't really understand what's there and what's around us, and we only have our perceptions, and we can't really know what's true. We can only kind of know what's true. And that started with Kant, that led into Hegel, that led into all that stuff. So he's right that it really has its roots in Kant, that separation of not being able to tell what material scientific reality is. And that's where they try to jump off and say, Stephen Hicks doesn't understand. Stephen Hicks even says in the same book, because I doubt the guy's read it, that he knows that that's a controversial statement to say that Kant's a postmodernist. I guarantee that that's just the route that he's gone down. It's the same route I've heard a million times from. And I remember there's a famous video taking down Jordan Peterson from, what's her name? Contrapoints. And she wanted to show Contrapoints in her very video shows, oh, these guys get down on all the modern, and they say we need to return to the modernists. Well, look at these modernists in their early writings from Hume and from Kant. They sure sound postmodernist. Yeah, that's Stephen Hicks's point. You just made the point for him, Contrapoints. I've pointed this out a million times. They get so like mixed up in it.
I liked that video.
Of
really
Contrapoints?
Super weird videos, like good production though.
Yeah, Contrapoints has good production. There's a I should say
Like
I
you can
like
tell
this.
there's a lot of time spent on those videos, and they're very well done. And I don't know. I felt like the Jordan Peterson was actually steelmanned instead of like just totally been like instead of just saying, oh, this is what he thinks, and it's not really what he thinks. Like I felt like
It was still, man, but she does real deconstruction, not the deconstruction all the ex-Mormons talks about. She leaves you in the realm of wondering and questioning if you understood or didn't understand, or if anything meant anything, or if they even know what they're talking about.
That's definitely how the production style is, right? Like
yeah. That's real deconstruction. And so like when I see other people going and doing like the other deconstruction, which should just have a different term. It's like falsification or something like that.
Or even just like skepticism, right? Like
Yeah, that's a
yeah.
better word. That's the word we were looking for.
Yeah.
You got on it. We kept saying falsification or something. Skepticism is the best word.
I feel like
Yeah,
I'm too
criticism.
skeptical. Like, I feel like I have gotten so skeptical that any positive claim, I'm like, yeah, but, and it leaves you kind of, I don't know, like makes it really hard to really bite your teeth into anything, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. There's that level. I mean, I become a critic of it too, of saying that it's easy to be on the critical side. That's,
Yeah.
you got Vervaeke and Peterson and Van der Klee and Pajau who are putting up ideas that I believe that on the positive realm and stuff, it's pretty darn good. I mean, that's all I can ever give somebody who's putting up positive claims. You're doing pretty darn good. And it's not going to be perfect because nothing's perfect, because then you have these pomo-trad types, these other monarchy Christian national type. They put up, like, they have good critiques. Like everybody, they say Marx always had good critiques or whatever of liberalism or modernism or capitalism. Those guys have the same, probably even better critiques, because I think Marx has like a weird conspiracy theory idea of how capitalism came about, whereas those other guys understand that it kind of more came about naturally and then fomented up into what it is. But they have good critiques of modernism. They have good critiques of liberalism. And then their prescription is stupid. It's just stupid. It's like a monarchy, Christian nationalist, stupid, wackadoo, terrible idea. And
Yeah. I have sympathy for like just the idea that it's really hard for people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Like if I were born in a different situation, I may be also struggling, right? So you have like some empathy for people that are born in different situations, and you're like, man, I would really like to help all those people. But I guess the problem I have with most socialist people, like when I was on Twitter, I had this back and forth online acquaintance, and we were sharing videos with each other, and they were like uber left activist. I think I don't know. They were saying that they hadn't come out to their mom, but they consider themselves trans, and their mom was like Catholic or something. And so, and they were all on board with, I have like a YouTube playlist still of a bunch of videos I never got around to watching, but I was watching some of the videos, and I guess I have sympathy for just Marx, like Marx didn't, I understand, I get it. I have sympathy toward it, but the problem is they talk about power, and I'm like, how on earth are you going to get that organization without some power structure? And how on earth are you ever going to trust that power structure that is giving you your communism lifestyle? Like the whole idea of
we know the answer. The
What?
answer is they don't know how.
Well, right. Like it seems really flawed, because it doesn't matter who's in power. I'm going to be skeptical of the person in power. And especially, why would you give them that much power to take so much control of people's lives? Like, it seems like a really bad idea to me.
So going on about how like it's hard to posit anything positive, I think so. The critical theorists, the Frankfurt Schoolists, Adorno and Horkheimer, they really understood that so much to the point that they invented this new game. This where the idea of Marxist critical theory comes out of, is that you can criticize, and then the utopia happens. Like that's really the framework. That's what it is. We will critical theory, capital C, critical theory is, it's basically, that's what the Hegelian dialectic is we criticize till it gets there.
But they don't do that.
No, they don't do it. And it doesn't work. And it's also a ridiculous
They're doing
framing
selective
of the
criticism.
nature of reality. But they also know, yeah, very much selective criticism. But I think they also know that, hey, we never have to posit anything positive because it's easier just to be critics. Like, I think there's like a dodge in that,
Oh yeah, no. Can you imagine, like, you can have an entire career as an academic and never have to produce a goddamn thing? Like, that's what critical theory is you destroy. You don't produce, you destroy.
Yep. Criticize, and then it really is written.
If you built the structure of anything that produced anything, you would be doing critical theory wrong.
And it really is part of their dialectical gnosis, as you might say, of that criticism will just one day turn into the utopia, and we can't even imagine what that utopia would be because we're not even the beings that would be by the time, because if we really start doing this stuff, we will even change ourselves down to our very beings. And
That
we
is-
can't even.
It's one of those things that James Lindsay has done, like, because I never really understood before, but the episode he did called Communism Doesn't Know How, where it really makes sense. Once you understand that part of how this works, is that it's not an accident or an omission that there's not a plan. It's built into it that there's no plan. They believe you cannot have a plan, because if you made a plan, you'd be making a plan within the system, and that plan would just be part of the system. That's why Derek Bell takes issue with the Civil Rights Amendment, because it's just part of a new structure. And so, of course, you can't have a plan. Any Marxist who pretends that there's a plan is doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Or that you can just be immediately criticized.
Destroy. That's all there is. All there is criticize, destroy. Pour that acid everywhere you see power, that a power imbalance that you don't like. You pour the critical theory acid until it's gone.
That's why Dan Dennett says that if you got getting because postmodernism is a little bit more of the same thing, even though that was a different school. It's just deconstruct, break down, and the postmodernists were a little bit more skeptical that a utopia would ever come. They just got full nihilists that it'll just be nothing. But if you read into any of their stuff and really actually read it and look at it, they were always still hopeful that they will deconstruct it into the utopia as much as any one of them ever was. It's in their writings. And that's why I usually kind of talk to even Mormons, like the Midnight Mormons or whatever. They go into these debates, and the debate is framed that we're going to criticize your thing and never criticize my thing. This was my criticism of the RFM debate from the start.
When they tried to, and they talked past each other, right?
Yeah, but the thing's framed as we're going to deconstruct your thing. I don't care what side.
And I don't have to construct anything in its place.
I don't have to construct anything, or I have my stuff deconstructed either. So anything that's framed of we're going to come in and the debate's going to be you have to try to fight to hold your thing together, and I get to tear it down. I can 99% of the time say who's going to win that debate.
Yeah.
And that's what the critical theorists realized and knew, and they knew they could dodge ever having to be put on the table for what their ideas of the future were if they say our ideas are just to criticize until we bring it there. Yeah, and Flip's point was good about Derek Bell saying that, even in the critical race theory world, any sort of the stuff that was built inside of our current paradigm is just part of that paradigm. So it naturally can't be good. So we got to break down and deconstruct the system so we can have, as Foucault would say it, new paradigms of thinking, new ways of thinking for the future after it's broken.
Well,
which is
Foucault is expand the potentialities of being.
That was the phrase I was looking for.
That's the one.
So it's lopsided. It's easy. It's easy to be the deconstructor. It's easy to say, "Hey, I'm just a critical theorist." But
well, see, that was my criticism of you guys. Is because you're get on and criticize Mormon stories, and it's that's easy to do, right?
Yeah, but we brought that up.
You can find hypocrites everywhere because we're never perfectly fair, right?
It's easy and fun.
Yeah, if you're just but that's kind of my point, is that those guys the ex-Mormons will only ever, they live in the world of saying we'll only ever be critics or we'll only take a debate if it's set up as we're the ones in the critic chair. And even the more recent ones of DeLynn and all that sorts of stuff, of him saying that he's going to take interviews and all that stuff, they all just got turned around into him dissecting the Mormons and the other person. They never actually get into we're gonna have you be dissected. But I think we'll try to put up some positive claims of how things should be or might be. But that's kind of one of our points, is that as Roger Scruton said, I brought it up many times before, but we're conservative insofar as Roger Scruton said the cry of the conservative is, hold on a minute. And that doesn't work very well for young people. It doesn't get them excited and rah, rah, rah and all that sorts of stuff. But
I'm a conservative because I believe in conserving classic episodes of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm 90s Amish. That's how I say it. It's like 1990s, like Seinfeld Amish is where stuff should have just kind of stopped right there, and we didn't need to keep pushing the criticism and dialectic on from.
Oh man,
Like,
we've been
just
catching
let me
up.
watch the Michael Jackson episode of Simpsons. 'Cause there's
Yeah.
so many, like, because they they do so many references of that. But when Barney does the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I can't, I don't know how. I guess I could learn how to pirate stuff. I should learn, but
So-
because sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just similar thought. Like we've been catching up on our rated R movies, and we're just like, whoa, this is not politically correct. Like, especially the comedy ones. There's so many gay jokes and fag jokes, and it's just like, ooh,
Have
this would
you
not
seen
fly.
Blazing Saddles?
Which one is that? I think I have.
Oh, you'd know it.
Yeah, what? Can you
I fall
imagine
asleep during most
if
movies.
somebody tried to make Blazing Saddles today?
It was the craziest thing, actually. I watched it with my brother-in-law and his wife and my wife. We got together and they wanted to watch a movie, and somehow that one got brought up because they just now started like, okay, we'll watch R-rated movies. And Blazing Saddles, we go to watch it, and like it starts out with Chinese people working on the railroad, and I was like, you're about to hear a racial slur, and they're like, what? And then they immediately do. And we get through the movie and they're like, man, that movie was kind of racist. I was like, no, it wasn't. It has racial slurs in it, but it's the opposite of racist.
Yeah.
It's about a backwater town learning that racism is actually not helpful to them because the one guy that can save them is a black guy, and they have to overcome their racism to accept him.
It was a satire of racism.
It was.
That's brilliant.
Who's in it?
Richard Pryor, Madeline Kahn, the main guy. What's his name?
I don't know why I can't think of him. He's the Willy
It's
Wonka.
so obvious. It's the guy. It's the name. He's super
I
famous. I know him.
I have.
He's
seen
hilarious. It's
Yeah.
that guy. His Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder. That's
Gene
it.
Wilder, yeah.
Cleveland Little. Yeah, Madeline Kahn. Oh, Harvey Korman's in that.
Yeah, I think I have
Glenn
at least seen
Pickens.
clips of that.
There's a great cast. Harvey Korman. You remember him from the Star Wars Holiday Special?
No, I don't watch Star Wars.
No, the Star Wars Holiday Special is something no one should watch unless you really
Oh.
like garbage. It's a legendary thing that happened in 1978.
I've always
that-
meant to, but
Have you never seen it?
no, I haven't.
It's funny because I'm a fan of legendarily bad things, and even people
yeah.
who love legendarily bad things say like it's hard to get through. Like it's not the entertaining kind of bad. It's just
I don't know, man.
really, really
we
bad
just
and incredibly boring.
we just watched our first David Breen movie, so
You
Neil
watched
Breen?
Neil Breen. Yeah, we watched the
one
Breen.
with the tuna fish cans and the laptops.
No, it was the one where like he had inexplicable superpowers at one point.
I am
like,
here.
He could
I am here.
teleport. No,
I'm
two
here
were out.
now. Sorry. I'm here. ... Now.
Oh, I don't know. No, but it's interesting. So you bring up, I don't know what you were talking about with the whole conservative thing, but I was looking through.
Oh, we were talking. I'll just say because you say, but Marty said that we're just being critics too, which was her original criticism of us. Which
It's one of them, but I
One of them.
need to learn to do 5 positive things and then 1 criticism. Apparently,
No, we don't need that. We're
We're not
more
bitches.
hardcore. We're not going to be mad at you because you didn't say enough nice things.
No, I'm
No,
actually
so-
happy to just skip past the niceties and just get to the dirty work.
Yeah, I always hated that in like companionship inventory when it's like say 3 nice things about your companion and then get to what's bothering you. And I'm like, okay, I get that works on some people, but like when my companion would say the 2 nice things, I was like, this is just tell me the bad thing, okay? Because this is stupid and this only works on stupid people, and I'm not a stupid person, so.
Yeah,
But
and that's things I ran into. Is like, what do you do when your companion is insane?
I know.
It's tough. It is
No,
tough.
so actually, I found this quote from this great quote from Demons, and this is what I want to hit people with anytime they accuse me of being conservative. So, Demons is the Dostoevsky book where it's like there's a socialist revolutionary that's trying to uproot an entire town, and he's talking to. I'm pretty sure he's talking to the mayor of the town at this point. And the mayor says to him, the mayor's the conservative, he just says, "We merely hold together that which you are shaking apart. We're not your enemies, by no means. We say to you, go forward, progress, even shake all that is old, that is and needs to be remade, but when needs be, we will keep you within necessary limits and save you from yourselves. So that's my, like, I never call myself conservative, but when people do, I'm like, look, I'll if I see you doing something really stupid, I'll try to stop you from doing that stupid thing.
Well, hindsight's 2020 too. Like, we can look back and say, oh yeah, communism in the Soviet Union was a bad idea. You know,
Sure.
the Cultural Revolution in China was a bad idea. But hindsight's like, we know that now, but I don't know.
Hey, and in 20 years,
Progressing
maybe
is not, well, yeah, just progressing is not always a net positive. We can look back right now on the stuff that has worked and say, see, all the progress was good, but that's because we have the benefit of being able to look back and seeing what worked. Like,
sure, and maybe in 20 years they'll be able to look back and they'll be able to say, hey, look, we know the people didn't know it at the time, but it turned out that lopping off the boobs of 14-year-old girls who like boyish things, that wasn't a great idea. We couldn't have known it at the time. But
That's
I feel like a lot of modern problems don't need hindsight, but some of them do. I get what you're saying there, though.
I don't know.
I can't remember what it was with that list.
And we know that Mao was bad. We know that Stalin was bad. Us four here.
Yeah, there's
go to
some people with
university,
hindsight.
Go to
of Mao
university,
that-
they don't know that Mao was bad.
It really is bizarre to me when you actually dig into it. And you don't even have to dig, like not even dig, just basic biography of the guy. And our entire lives, it's been perfectly natural for people to just walk around wearing an image of Che Guevara on a T-shirt, like, and it's just perfectly all right. And then beyond that, like James Lindsay talked about in that book from Freire, when like Freire like is
Paulo
like
Freire,
giving his
yeah.
example of his perfect activist, he offers Che Guevara.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, but yeah, it's insane to me.
Che Guevara, Franz Fanon. Did he bring up Franz Fanon? I think all we dare do, because part of the conservative thing is being cautious about giving too much ideas and stuff. But I like the stuff that Peterson says is like clean your room, work on your own self, work on some sort of instrument, work on your family, work on hanging with a friend or talking with some people, that sort of thing. And that's really. Yeah.
I definitely sympathize with a criticism that an anti-identity is not an identity, right?
Mhm.
So if all of your identity is that like I'm anti-Mormon or whatever, that's anti-woke, even any anti-identity isn't an identity. But like I guess the points that I like to bring up are liberalism, right? Like I think liberalism and individualism, all these things that Western society is founded on,
that's the stuff.
I think they're beautiful ideas, and they're things that we're an uphill battle to get here, and we're like running dangerously close to losing them. And that's why I criticize wokeness, because wokeness most of the time just is completely illiberal.
All the time. I think if you get into any sort of like the detailed, not all woke people are ultimately liberal, but the actual, because that's one of the things like the Mormons
saw the dumb old nothing original to wokeness is good, nothing good about wokeness is original thing totally applies.
It is
people say the same
specifically
thing about Mormonism,
illiberal
too.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can say that about a lot of things, because like
right.
people make that argument about like, well, some people find help in Scientology, and it's like, well, yeah, but you can pick that shit out, and it's not original to Scientology. Like the part where somebody listened to you talk about your problems and gave you like simple advice about how to feel better. Like, yeah, okay, that works, but you don't need all the rest of the bullshit to get that.
Do you think all Mormons should be freed of Mormonism, Marty?
Hmm?
Do you think all Mormons should be freed of Mormonism? I think DeLynn will kind of phrase that as like everybody should have informed consent of what they're getting into. But you could say that we're doing the same thing with that. People should have informed consent of what they're getting into with wokeness. But
don't have a good answer.
I wish I could ask John DeLynn directly, is it okay to be Mormon as far as he's concerned? Is it okay?
He says it is if they have informed consent of everything they're getting into. But that's kind of like saying,
what does that
mean? They're contributing to a flawed system that causes
what he's
harm,
saying is like, because that seems like if John Larson with his "you have blood on your hands" thing, to resign your BYU job, because
they talk out of both sides of their mouths on it.
Yeah, like really, because that seems like very quick. You'd be like, well, do you really think that's okay? Because like is it you can only be a Mormon if you're one of the sisters in Zion, basically, is what I imagine is what it would come down to.
Which is
Like,
essentially not being a Mormon.
yeah, as long as you are a communist activist doing entryism into Mormonism, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
So my general stance with Mormonism is this: it's like a larger frame pragmatic thing. But if not only do I think most Mormons should stay Mormon, I think if the general concept of Mormonism as we knew it gets lost, it makes that entire people susceptible to some form of neo-Maoism. Like that's the idea, I think.
But I would also say I wouldn't
Probably only
ever
about 50%
hide.
of them.
Yeah. I also say I wouldn't ever hide anything from like a Mormon, like that I think might lead them astray from the church. Like if they want to ask me about my issues with the church, I'm not going to hide it and pretend that like, no, it's great, you should stay. I'll tell them what I think about it. I don't want to be the guy trying to keep the cat in the bag.
Yeah, if somebody's
Yeah.
asking, I'm not going to lie. If somebody's asking, I mean, I talked with my parents about it when they asked, and they said, "Okay, stop talking." And I said, "Okay, I'll stop talking." You know.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's plenty. Thanks.
yeah.
Another thing's like I you know how the shortest version of that conversation that I've had a few times in my life is the few people that actually try and care, and when they try to come to me, it's like, so what exactly do you have against feminism? Yeah, very quickly. Okay, we're done. We don't want to hear anymore.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's plenty.
Yeah.
What do I have against feminism? I think that men and women are equal.
Yeah, no, I believe in equality. That's
Yeah.
in the fewest words possible. My problem with feminism, I believe in equality. They do not.
Yeah. I don't know about the Mormon question because when I was really fresh, I was definitely in that informed consent camp. Like I was like, I think the church should tell them. And I was talking to my brother and he was like, why? Like, are they hurting themselves? Is this hurting them? And I mean, there's definitely a large section of people that they say, yes, this was hurting people, right? Like there's a bunch of ex-Mormons that say, yeah, it is not a healthy mindset for a bunch of people. I would argue that maybe a more engineer, black, white type thinker like me is probably not healthy for like there's personalities that kind of need to be reined in, and there's like personalities that need to be like pushed away, right? And I think I was one that should have been like, go on. And there's others that don't take it so seriously. Like, for example, I have 2 daughters, and one is one and one is the other personality. And I am like, she would be just fine. And over here, I'm like, this would destroy her. Like, she would overthink everything and be like repenting to God every second. Like, it would not be good for her. So, yeah, I don't know.
Scrupulosity. Yeah, scrupulosity is a tough thing. But one of my things I point out to Dylan. Yeah, one of my things I point out to Dylan is that most people who suffer from scrupulosity it doesn't go away because they left the religion. And sometimes you even see them say, I got rid of it because I left the religion. And
it manifests,
they just don't have to look at it and it manifests out.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just saying there's some personalities that like fit well with Mormonism. It's probably not that bad, but there's others that like, dang, if they knew that, they could have walked away from it and probably still been an okay person. You know, like it's not like it was helping them not go into drugs because they never would have done that anyway, if that makes sense. So I don't know. For the most part, I kind of came to the conclusion that I can treat my family like adults. They know how to use the internet and they can look it up themselves. Like nothing's going to convince them anyway if they aren't willing to like. They're not going to be convinced by me telling them. So the information's out there; they can figure it out themselves. But
yeah, so
it does bother me.
I
don't know.
So my wife had a live stream a couple of weeks ago that I talked about this with her, where I was talking about, and I'll give you the condensed version of it. My biggest beef with the Mormon Church, which is essentially that it's sort of this all-encompassing religion that tries to be your identity. And I felt like that didn't really mess with me too much because like anytime like I had a pretty firm idea of who I was and what my moral compass was, and a lot of it fit all right within Mormonism, but the parts of it that didn't, I deferred to my own moral compass rather than Mormonism. But Mormonism wants you to stay within that moral compass. It doesn't want you to develop a Mormon identity. It wants to be your identity. So when you leave it, you don't And if you did it the correct way, you don't have an identity. And if like a, 30, 40, 50-year-old man or woman is trying to, at that age, pick up these shattered pieces and create their own identity, they're not going to do a very good job at it most of the time. And B, they're going to look for another thing that gives them one of those prepackaged identities. So I'm very slow to push people away from Mormonism, but I also have that whole, that sort of loyalty to literal truth. And so I do get stuck there, like wondering, okay, should I, like, if this guy asks me about my problems, should I tell him all of my problems, or should I just let him keep believing in Mormonism, because I think he might be one of the guys that's just better off not touching it, because he would collapse and never recover from that thing shattering.
Yeah, it was like the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Easy. So, and it was part of my.
See, I only saw it as hard because my wife was still Mormon at the time. But I feel like if I had it would have sent me into like an existential crisis of, oh, does God exist, or blah blah blah. But other than that, it felt good. Like I felt like, I don't have to do this stuff anymore. I don't have to. It didn't feel like something like a hole, like a religion-shaped hole was in me. It felt like religion was this boot on my throat, and it was no longer on my throat, and then I'm gone.
Leaving Mormonism is like third hardest thing tops in my life. Like really
But
being generous.
I'm
third.
I'm saying that that's a different sort of thing, because most people would say, I think what you said, that it's the most difficult thing in my life. It totally shattered me. And that's sort of my beef with Mormonism that I was talking about, is that it gives you that prepackaged identity. And then so if you leave it, it shatters all of that identity. And a lot of people look for another prepackaged identity, or they try to piecemeal one together from scratch as an adult with kids. And that's very difficult. So it's kind of like they've spiritually atrophied by using that crutch.
Maybe.
And
I had a
and
lot
I
of
don't really
pillars
know.
though. Like
What do you mean?
even now, like part of my identity, I would say, is I grew up as a farm kid. So that's like one of the pillars for sure. And then there's other pillars, like, I don't know, being an engineer, a mom, a wife, like those are all pillars. And Mormonism was like probably the most prominent one. Like, I remember thinking this probably during the I'm a Mormon campaign. And I remember thinking it's fascinating. Like, if someone wanted to know what I was about, I could answer in I'm a Mormon. Like, that is what I would tell them. Like, that was the most defining thing. And so I don't know, that sucks when you lose that thing that's like the thing that's kind of pulling all the other stuff together, And politics is in there too. Like, I also feel like I'm a libertarian. That's like another one. But those are all, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't spend very much of my life as a true believing Mormon, and I don't know how much even at all. It for sure was just centered around the mission and a little bit after, because I was one of those kids who grew up not really into it, not really liking it, wishing I could get out of it, kind of rebelling in high school, kind of hoping to get out of it. Ended up on the mission, felt like I got guilted into it. And then on the mission, I said, okay, if I'm going to be here, I might as well just try it. If I'm going to be here, I'm not just going to waste the time. So it was basically trying through the mission and just a little bit after it. So it was like 3-year total thing. But getting away from it, most of my arguments and most of the things I look at and most of the stuff where I come back to terms with it is really bird's eye view stuff. It really is just like, oh my gosh, I grew up in a region that was just so peaceful, quiet, nice, and great, amongst everybody around them. And I do have Mormonism to thank for that, for the region and area I grew up around. And I would make a prediction, like these very regions that we all live in, should the Mormonism completely go the way of the dodo, just flash away, that these areas would fall the hell apart. That's really how I view it or see it, that there is something in the glue of the society that we grew up in and around, that we have. Maybe it was an overly tyrannical structure down at the end of it, but we have a lot to think about the peaceful society that was largely pluralistic, not perfect, but largely pluralistic, about as pluralistic as it gets in human history, right here in this region. And I just have like a lot to think of it for that. Like, I have Mormonism to thank for even being able to be a person who could become an atheist, if that makes sense.
That could be, but I don't know that other regions that aren't religious aren't like well glued together. Like places in Europe, like they don't have kids, so they're not like
Oh,
sustaining themselves.
I
But
for sure
say
don't
they're-
think it requires only Mormonism, no. But Mormonism made a
right.
specific one for here.
But someone could also say, if you grew up an atheist that's peaceful and stuff, oh, I have atheism to save or to thank for that. I just think it's a lot of things. I don't know if it's just Mormonism.
I just don't think
know. Maybe
that's.
I'm just
I don't think
bitter
think
and not willing to give
atheism-
that.
I don't
This
think
man's
athe- I
bearing
don't
his
think there's-
testimony to you, and you're just spitting in his face.
I don't think
Yeah.
you've had like an atheistic society that allowed for like the religious thing really yet in history. Maybe one's coming in the future, but we'd have to see if it even survives or makes it that long before trampling all over itself. Because in my view, they all work towards some sort of technocracy, and which is basically what Maoist China and I mean, Hitchens would have been critical of that, but I do think there's something to say for the state takes over. The state takes over when religion's not perfect and religion's not the great overarching thing, but at the same time too, when it becomes just the state, so far that just seems to go to straight extreme trouble.
Yeah.
Any religion is preferable to state religion.
Yes.
Well, or even it's hard to not see this, and maybe I'm just seeing this because what I'm listening to and stuff, but it does feel like we're religious about something, and there's a lot of people that are religious about politics, and so it's so interesting because it's like that almost seems to be the highest importance in people's lives. And it's like, oh, if the prophet does this that's against my religion, then I'm leaving that religion. You know, like the prophet, the church is actually not the most important thing to them. It's actually their politics. And when their church
Like-
doesn't do the right thing, I'm going to leave that church.
All the people who left the church because of gay rights. It's like, what was your theology this whole time? What the hell did you think you
No,
believed
there's
in?
people that are definitely leaving because of the vaccine stuff too. Like, oh, Nelson's like propagating that you should get vaccinated, so I'm out. Like, right? Like,
But that's exactly the meaning crisis, and I religion can go haywire, but I actually see it as like the way football is to war. Like you play football instead of doing war. In a weird way, I see like religion's like this buffer against turning politics into your religion. But then religion, obviously, whenever that happens, it can get as murderous as anything too. It's just it's when the state and your super beliefs become the same thing at the top. That's where war is. But that's just how I perceive it and see it. But I wouldn't go yoinking away. I got to a point, because there was definitely a point where I was perfectly happy to yoink away Mormonism for anybody who wanted to talk about it. I was always
For sure.
respectful, but I've gotten to the point where I'm like, nah, maybe you guys all hang around here a little bit. But now there's the whole other side of it where Mormonism is probably just going down the same statist route as everything else is. And that's part of what we look at. We don't just rip up Delenn.
Oh, yeah.
We look at how the Mormons are just becoming as much statists as anybody.
yeah, but okay, like my criticism
I
of
met
James Lindsay is that it's that anti-identity. Like I feel like he is just anti-woke. Like there isn't any, I don't know, and he's pro anybody that's also anti-woke. Like I don't know.
That's
I don't know
true.
about the
I mean,
second part of that as much as the first one, but no, yeah, it's fair. He is pretty, because like my criticism, like some of my criticism was with like the so and so belongs in jail or these people belong in jail stuff. It's like, oh god, where?
Well, yeah,
what
that
exactly
was
are you
like
talking
I
about?
watched he had that thing with Charlie Kirk recently where they get up there and Charlie Kirk says that drag queen story hour the people that have done drag queen story hour belong in jail. I was like, I don't know about
Not very
that,
libertarian
man.
of him, is it?
Yeah, well,
No,
I don't think
no,
I don't know
also,
if
but, like-
Charlie Kirk. He's pretty authoritarian. I
Like
mean,
on what kind? Because that's one of those things when when everybody people say all the time like Donald Trump belongs in jail, and I always say for, like, what's the charge?
the Taco Bell,
You
or the Taco Bowl from Trump Tower, probably.
Oh yeah.
If I had to guess.
But yeah, it's like it's like you're just saying you think he's a really bad guy, and or are you like leveling an accusation?
I
'Cause,
was
that's the
talking
thing,
to
it's
my
like-
cousin last weekend, and I was asking her some things, and she was saying guilt by association because there's like a list of 7 people that have been prosecuted and arrested for being around him, and half of them he pardoned, and so that looked shady. And I
I
wasn't.
know what they're saying.
Paul-
General Flynn and
Paul Manafort
General
was
Flynn and Manafort and
Tell,
no,
will
those
you guys catch me up on Manafort? because I
Christian,
I have no idea.
Manafort, I don't remember. The thing is, at one point in time, I
I'm a
did look
man.
into every single one of them. And I looked into every single one of those
Well, I
accusations.
know that
of
Michael
the-
Flynn, if I remember right.
Flynn got unmasked for supposedly talking to a foreign government, like surely Obama's administration did, like surely Biden's administration.
Well, no,
did
I thought
before
his
Trump
charge
in
was that he
office.
lied to the FBI. Was the actual
Yeah,
charge?
they went in, and the FBI even said in that charge, as they came out of it, that they knew that they had purposely asked him a question, knowing that they were trying to trap him in something. that
Yeah.
He said that he hadn't said something on the phone the day before, and he had said it, and that's all it was. And it's just ridiculous.
Fishing trip.
And it was all thing from Biden unmasking his phone call that they don't like. Trump didn't unmask Biden's phone calls when Biden was coming into office, as bad as the stuff he did. That's kind of the thing that we point at, is that Trump did January 6th or whatever. There was a literal coup going on as Obama was leaving the office and Trump was coming in, that they were unmasking and watching all of his phone calls and spying on him, as it came out to be true that they were spying on him. And then they had this thing where I think it was Manafort might have been part of it, but there was Donald Trump Jr. and them. They supposedly got word from WikiLeaks that they had dirt on Hillary Clinton before the general public did, and that all came out and turned out to not be true at all. And what's his name? The other guy, I forget his name, but yeah, the every
There's a
single one of
Breitbart
them.
guy too. What's
A
that
Breitbart
Breitbart?
guy.
The fat guy.
Oh, Steve Bannon.
Yeah, they put him on that list too.
Steve Bannon wasn't getting prosecuted at that time. He's getting prosecuted now because supposedly he misused money that was sent for a wall fund. The thing is, like, every single one of these things are fishing expeditions. They put the people under investigation for crimes before they know what the crimes are, and then they go start trying to search out what the crimes are in hindsight, and then they just leave them under investigation. And they leave the investigations open for 2 years. And then during those 2 years that they leave the investigations open, Trump can't do anything to them, or they'll call it obstruction or something like that. It's just them playing the games that they know that they can play to get these people to do something. Not one of them had any sort of crime that actually came out against them or something like that. And it's ridiculous. Yeah. And if Trump did the reverse to Biden or Obama, it would be ridiculous and just as bad. And absolute kangaroo court style type crap, and
that was satisfying for her. She's doesn't like Trump, and I don't know that she really likes Biden either, actually, but she doesn't like.
I don't know anybody who's super stoked on Biden.
Right.
On Biden?
Well, I've seen him.
Met
I've just.
But I live in a pretty liberal place.
I've met some people who are pretty defensive of him.
Yeah. Downtown Salt Lake City is pretty freaking leftist.
My parents like Biden, but at the same time too, like all this Trump stuff. I remember, like, I was not a Trump fan. I wasn't into Trump at all. I didn't vote Trump. I didn't like Trump, and I was almost dizzy the day that he won because I didn't know what the heck happened. And it was only years later that, like, after a while, you start seeing one lie, two lies, three lies, and so then each time the media comes out with another lie, you start looking into it deeply. I read the entire Mueller report. I read the Republican report on the investigation of the Mueller report, and the hazy fuzziness and the lies that the media says about what those things actually say are so ridiculous. That
it's one of those things, if somebody asks you the question of, like, what's something you were wrong about and that you changed your mind about, my answer is, like, in 2016, I thought that it was very likely, if not a stone cold lock, that they would find some kind of criminal activity on the part of Trump or anyone in his organization. Like, I thought it was pretty much a lock. I'm like, it's only a matter of time before they find something. And I also thought that, yeah, like, I mean, would love just that. And I have to admit, I was wrong. Like, at this point, I have to think that he might be, like, the cleanest businessman in politics, apparently.
Do you know what that current investigation
They can't find anything on him.
Have you seen that new one that AG brought against him?
Wait, the New York thing? Like, a civil case? She's not, like, the fact that she's bringing this on behalf of her.
Right before election stuff.
Like,
and she ran her campaign
and
that she would do that.
It's based on overvaluing.
It's so corrupt. He overvalued his real estate and got a loan he paid back. He's already paid back the loan in full.
And the loan's been paid.
So they got their money and they made their money. But she says, he overvalued his property. And that's
is
after the
that-
lady spent 2 years trying to find whatever she could because she needed something because she runs her campaigns on
But it's
prosecuting
like,
Trump.
I guess, I mean, because they're going to say that because when banks give large loans on property, like they do their due diligence. It's not like they're just Donald Trump says, "Oh, it's worth $2 billion," and they say, "Yes, sir." At least I don't think so. Unless maybe, I mean, and if he's got that kind of credit with them, then he earned it. So
They say no,
you
but
know?
still, they paid the money and he's already paid it back.
So it's
He's
not
already
even,
paid
yeah, yeah.
back with interest.
Yeah,
They've
so when I
already
first
made
heard it,
their
I was
money
like,
off.
yeah, and then but the fact that it's a civil case, and that's the thing is like, and I've heard some people, commentators, I think Ben Shapiro talked about it, where it's like, like it's not technically against the rules for a prosecutor to act like this, to bring a case on behalf of themselves, basically, on behalf of no one, but like it's extremely strange that she's doing this. It's like, yeah, that's really
The thing
obvious.
that
But of
thing
course,
that really
but
melts
also
my
it's not
head-
because she announced when she ran that was her goal. That was her whole operation. Because she
The
was
thing that
like
really
me.
melts my head is
She
I think
believed that Trump was guilty, and all we had to do was look hard enough and find it. But unlike me, I accepted the evidence that he is apparently not guilty.
the thing about, for me is so weird. I mean, I guess I kind of get it because they're trying to find stuff that should get him removed from office or disqualified from running for office. So they're trying to find something extreme. But there's always a level for me, like we all always just could have criticized Trump perfectly well as somebody that you wouldn't want as president or something like that. How come you don't stick to those arguments? But it's because they're always trying to find something more extreme that means absolute disqualification. So they're always going to hyper levels, and that puts them in the realm of having to come up with lies about stuff. And like, there's a part of me that Biden, whatever happened with Biden, he's got all sorts of corrupt stuff in his history. But if the idiots voted for him, the idiots get him. I mean, that's kind of how I see it, And we just got to suffer through it. I'm not like we got to find some reason to disqualify him from the office or get him impeached.
I think there's a good argument to be made that like him getting into office will I wouldn't put it past him to like try to keep the Michael Knowles happy and go ahead and like make some laws that are not liberal.
Trump. Well,
Yeah.
I think both sides are very willing to trample all over.
Yeah, like I
constitutional
don't
things at
think
this
he's
point.
principled. I don't think he has
But
good
he-
character. I don't think like
But we have
don't know.
4 years of Trump. We know what Trump did. So
Yeah.
Trump had 4 years to establish the white ethno-state that we all know that he's advocating
Well,
for.
I had a hard
Yeah.
I don't like critical theory, right? But I don't like the idea of banning it. But maybe in elementary schools, I don't know. But like it doesn't banning ideas isn't the right way either.
But that's where he did it. He banned it inside of government places.
No.
Like it's one
a
of those
First
things that you
Amendment-
say at
it's
the
not a
schools.
ban.
Is that,
This
like,
is not a ban. It's a First Amendment issue. It's
yeah,
that
the
simple. It's a First Amendment.
government can't teach it to you is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Like,
Like the Bible is not banned in public school. You can teach about the Bible. You cannot teach the Bible. And that's the problem with critical race theory is because, like, as James Lindsay points out, is that according to critical race theory, you can't just talk about it. You have to do it. You have to do praxis. That's where the problem is. So, like, should you be able to talk about critical race theory in schools? Absolutely.
yeah, and
Can't
the
do it.
whole entire thing is government officials are the ones who are teaching and training you and putting you through trainings that you can put
Yeah,
a
that's
ban
like-
on what the government's mandating of you.
Yeah.
It's
And that's the other thing is
different.
like and the government can absolutely ban racist training. Like there's already rules about it's against
Right,
the
there's
rules
already
to discriminate
rules,
on
so
the
you
basis
don't
of
need
race.
new rules, right? Like
Well,
that's
well,
kind
I
of the
feel like-
point.
But no,
So
but
my
you might need a policy coming out saying, hey, this critical race theory is
Is
racist,
racist.
and so we're not allowing it.
I think so. I think my big problem with it is it's kind of illustrated pretty well in this whole purging these school systems of these books, like Genderqueer is one of those books that they try to get out of school systems. I take issue with them framing it as banning books because I am against banning books. I am against art being censored by the government. I'm not against taking actual porn out of public school, like out of public schools.
Like
Because
having
that's,
ratings for your kids.
No, like this
I'm
is the thing
not even
the
talking about that.
banning
I'm
books
talking
now-
about like if you say banning books, I'm thinking of making books illegal. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, that-
like making
that's the other
certain,
thing
taking certain books out of circulation and making it illegal. And I think that's why they use the word banning books, because historically that's what it's been.
Yeah, they know
is making them
the
illegal.
concept.
Yeah.
And everybody
they're
now is
intentionally-
against that. We're
they're
a pretty
intentionally being
liberal
fast.
country still, and so we're all against banning books. So if they call it that, which is not what's happening, genderqueer people want it out of
They're being
public
fast
schools.
and loose about that.
So don't
Have you-
make the book genderqueer illegal. Just maybe keep it
No.
out of public schools,
Again,
because
with
it depicts an
genderqueer-
actual blowjob.
It's a very simple thing. Like, I mean, it's a simple challenge. Like that. Like Chris has done it. I've done it because on on Facebook and the social media. When you get into these people are like, it's not porn. Like, okay, then post it. Post it here. Post it on Facebook.
That's what
Post
I
it on
had with
Twitter.
the Deseret News.
Show it to
put up
your
a thing-
boss at work.
The
Tell
Deseret
me
News
it's
put up
not
a thing
porn.
saying, "Oh, I can't believe they're banning this from the schools." And the very first book they had listed was the genderqueer book. And so I
Yeah.
commented on the thing like, "How fast would you
Like-
guys ban me off of this thread if I posted the picture from the book?"
Yeah.
And somebody
that's
tried
the
to.
thing.
I
We're
think
not
Jared
talking
tried to
about-
post the picture from the book.
I
and
tried. They
didn't
don't let
allow him to
pictures
post
on there.
picture. So
They're
he's
not
banned.
talking about like the old National Geographic style nudity.
Have you seen the
No.
pictures, Marty? From that
Yeah,
book?
I've seen some of them.
I've
Like,
seen
no,
the
it's-
whole. Well, I saw that it was like a small section in the big book. Like my kids read lots of books like that, where they're like the comic style and they're reading,
Like-
and so it's like a few pages. Like they were able to blow up every picture in that book, and it represented like a very small portion of the whole book. Which I'm not saying that makes it okay. I'm just
a
I don't know. That's the
cartoon
whole.
depiction
That
of a
is the whole
blowjob.
story, and that does make it slightly. I think that does frame it less slightly different, right?
It's a cartoon depiction of a blowjob in a narrative about adolescents engaging in oral sex in a book aimed
There's
at
other
school
Exploring their
children.
sexuality. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
Make blowjobs difficult to find. Life here, I live by this axiom, and it's that life was better when boobs were harder to see. We were happier and we killed ourselves a lot less. And I'm saying this from a point of view of a kid that grew up as an elementary school age kid in the 90s. It was still reasonably difficult for me to see boobs. Not very difficult. I just had to go to my grandma's house because she had cable. She didn't realize this, but she had HBO. I had to spend the night there, wait for my brother to fall asleep, and then I could turn on HBO. Boobs. Of course, the first time I did that, it was eyes wide shut, and that was a horrifying experience. But it was still boobs. Then the internet came. I could lock myself in a closet, get a dial-up connection. Look, boobs.
damn internet! It has
As a
made
second grader, I
porn
saw
too-
like hardcore porn.
Have you?
And I'm like, you know what? This should have been more difficult. Like the things that men have done throughout the ages just to see boobs are insane. We've moved mountains. We've created
Abigail
civilizations to see
Stryer,
boobs.
I believe it, but Abigail Stryer believes like a lot of these different little issues of people like young girls maybe not wanting to grow into adult girls because they were exposed to very rough or difficult or bad porn at younger ages. And I don't know how verified that is, but she makes the claim. That was one that Peterson actually asked her, "Do you have data on that?" And she goes, "No, I just think it's true."
Video game with cheat codes on. Once you put God mode on your video game, like it's no longer fun. And you can achieve all the goals you got to get over this fence. You got to learn the skills in
still
a
on the
video game to
porn.
get over this fence. All you do is just do this code that gives you a jetpack, so you don't have to develop the skills. So we don't have to develop the skills required to see boobs anymore, and
There's
we
this,
just put them into the internet. We don't have to even be people.
I remember there's this old joke on Mark Maron that he said that when we were young, we couldn't come across porn anywhere unless we were really lucky. Somebody had to like leave some magazine in the gutter or something. That never happened. So we didn't have any sort of access to it. And you want to know what it made us? It made us poets. we had to write poetry and write songs and think about women in that sort of way. And, it's a pretty funny joke. But yeah, it's pretty rough. I mean, I definitely grew up as somebody who was anti censorship type stuff, and I do not have one problem at all of genderqueer getting banned from public schools. And the way people frame it, and especially when they're giving gish gallops in like an argument thread.
Which, by the way, if somebody tried to pass a law making genderqueer an illegal book, I would maybe break Flip's cardinal rule of not joining up into activism, and I would absolutely protest making genderqueer illegal.
What about Amazon? I remember when, oh man, this is a long time ago. There was some guy in Colorado Springs. Actually, his name was, no, I think he was from Pueblo, because I was living in Colorado, so this kind of made news. And he had a guide to a pedophile's guide to love, or some weird book, right? And this was being sold on Amazon, and everybody was all up in arms. This had to be around like 2009, and we weren't in Colorado yet. I take it back. I remember we were in school. But anyways, anyway, we canceled. At that time we had 2 Amazon accounts, and we canceled one of them to like show our distaste. Anyway, they later took the book off, right? Well, now they're like banning conservative books, I think. I can't remember which book it was.
Now there's
There
a
was
bunch of them. There's the Johnny the Walrus. They got rid of
Yeah.
for a little bit.
So anyway, I thought it was interesting because it is kind of a slippery slope. Like, it is a private company, right? But they were trying to stand on the ground of like, well, I mean, it was an ebook or something. It wasn't like, I don't know, but everybody was up in arms about it. But we don't want Amazon to be the arbiter of like what is good and bad. I mean, it should be obvious that you shouldn't have pedophile books for sale, but I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. It's weird though, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
hard to like have a consistent rule all the time.
It's when, like, if this is your principle, then how badly would things have to go for you to forgo your principle,
Right.
in order to,
Yeah. So, because what happened, there was a Reddit thread, and they were talking about how Amazon was banning this conservative book. And then I posted a link to that story where they banned this other book. And nobody read the book. Like, it honestly could have been a book about how to not engage when you really want to, right? Like, it could have been, you know what I mean? Who knows what the book, nobody knew what the book was about. So anyways.
Yeah, that private company thing gets harder when those companies have so much, power. And
Well, and I guess that's where you get to the point where you say, I have the principle of let the private company do what they will with their own private company. It's theirs. And how far does your principle go before it sort of collapses? Like, if they own everything, then at what point do you say, no, you have to sell this book?
Yeah, I also kind of believe that gets weird in private public partnership stuff that's been going on lately, because I don't think any monopolies really exist without governmental help. So it gets to some sort of level that but I think part of that, what they get around, what's wrong with them, is they don't make clear what their rules are. And there should be a clear defined. That's one of the things Peterson said in his Twitter message when he came back to him, is you guys do not delineate. You purposely don't make it clear what's acceptable and what isn't. I don't think it'd be that hard to put a non-pedophile
Promotion or something.
requirement on Amazon, but I don't know what sort of rule, because I'll give them the leeway. Maybe they don't want Matt Walsh's book on their site. So what sort of universal rule could they put about that book that wouldn't also apply to genderqueer? I don't know what universal rule they can put that would block.
They wouldn't. Like,
yeah, they'd keep
they don't
the
care
rule.
about
They wouldn't make a
principles.
rule.
No.
But I guess some of it just goes off of how many people complain or not, and that's sort of deal.
I think that's what happened with the other book. Like, it just was not a popular book. Nobody knew about it. Someone found it and blew it up. And then everybody was canceling their Amazon subscriptions. And so then they caved.
I don't think it's that hard to make like a specific rule. Just like as libertarians, we think there can be laws against actual pedophilia and stuff like that. Where we say we want to minimize laws and all that stuff, but I have no problem with a law against pedophilia.
I'd say it's a divisive. It's a divisive subject in the libertarian community.
Yeah, that's definitely come up.
Are you serious?
About that. Oh yeah.
Libertarians are really weird like some of them, not most of them that I know personally are very reasonable. Like, yeah, no, age of consent is a good thing.
Right.
But there's a lot of them get real weird if you get into the deep libertarian circles of the internet.
A lot of those types of people, like Foucault or whatever, they'll choose libertarianism as their platform because it will be the thing where they can make the argument that they should be able to do their thing. And
yeah, I kind of have. I mean, I understand that saying 18 is arbitrary, and there's some like 16-year-olds that are more mature than a 22-year-old. But you got to draw the line somewhere, and so.
Well, yeah, at some point it has to
makes-
be arbitrary, because you can't say like, what else are you going to do? If it's not arbitrary, it's going to be like something biological. Like, as soon as you go through puberty,
or some test
it's
that's
fair
also going to
game,
be
then-
flawed.
No, that's not a good thing. So it's
We
got to
just-
be too much for some people. Like, you err on the side of setting an age of consent that's older than you need to.
Yeah, we just shared a video today that like Spain's equity minister or something said that all ages. If consent is there, all ages should be fine. But that's one of the things Jonathan Streeter's gotten into pointing out is how Foucault made all the cases, and we've even kind of pulled up some libertarians, and it's usually not always, but it's usually people consider themselves left-leaning libertarians will also make the arguments for free love and age is just a number and that type of stuff, and they do align with libertarians. But there's all sorts of stuff that like I could call. I mean, I still hold the same classical liberal or libertarian, but you hold to all sorts of little ideas of things that I don't think we can get rid of laws in that realm. You know, I don't think you can't get rid of laws of you can't murder people. You can't be so libertarian that murder's legal. You know, I think I don't know. Is there an anarchist? Is there an anarcho argument for that?
So the closest ones I've ever heard are like when you start talking to the ANCAPs, and they have the weirdest. I mean, they're like any anarchist. They have the weirdest outlook on human nature. That like crazy naive. It's always like, well, in my perfect government, nobody would kill anyone anyway. There's no point. There's no self-interest in killing people, so we wouldn't have to have a law because people wouldn't do it.
So, and that's
when you talk to communists or anarchists, like a basic criticism that applies to both is that, like, whenever I'm talking to them, it's like, it sounds like you've never met another person.
I know.
Like, the way they talk about society, it really is like, have you been outside? Have you done any? Have you shopped? Have you been in traffic? Have you tried to do anything with other people?
It gets to utopian.
Oh, that's so
endpoint.
interesting though. Like, because I look at like I'll go out in traffic and go out in public, and I'm like, I can't believe we're all cooperating this well. Like, why are we cooperating? Like, maybe I'm more cynical than I don't know. Like Jordan Peterson talks about this, just like how it's a miracle like we even have the lights on, and I see that a lot, especially with how much incompetence I run into.
When he said that, it rang a little bell, because I remember when I was like 17, 18, having like, it was pre-mushrooms, but I now would call it like a mushroom thought of like, it was all the way to work where I was like, I can't believe traffic lights work. Like all the time, like nearly all the time. And then I was kind of like, the water comes out of the tap every time. And I really was like, yeah.
There's that great Hannibal Buress bit where he talks about how I just have infinity water. He's like, it just pulled through. Like people talk about their water bill, they're running out of water. How do you run out of water? I have infinity water. I just pull it. Sometimes I leave it on for days at a time just because it never stops.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of those things that Ayan Hersey Lee, she said that the first thing that shocked her when she came to the West is that the trains like showed up when they said they were going to show up.
It was a bus stop.
Yeah.
It was a bus stop, and the bus arrived. There was a schedule on the bus stop, and the bus arrived on time. And
I've heard America's not good with that, and then like people go to Europe and they miss the bus because it's on time. Is that?
Well, Utah's famously bad busing. I don't know. I think there are probably some places in America that are better. Like I remember Brazil. I mean, it's been a long time, but like Brazil was awesome with buses because they were cheap, and like especially in the denser parts of the city, some of them ran every 5 or even 2 minutes.
Yeah, in Mexico.
Yeah, they're really easy to get to in Brazil.
Came.
That was where I had my first, what I consider my first threesome, was on a bus in Brazil, because they were always jam-packed, standing room only, and there's a couple that was just right up against my chest. They're just making out hardcore, like just inches from my face. And we got off the bus. I was like, I think I just had a threesome.
You were more in the flatland, right? Because Belo Horizonte, it's fun to ride the bus because all of Belo Horizonte is hilly. It's just hills everywhere. You imagine a crazy bus driver and everybody's standing, and it's actually kind of a roller coaster ride.
That would be terrifying. We would always play a game where we tried to get on the bus and just like he takes off before you find a seat, obviously. So we would try to, without grabbing anything, walk all the way to the back. That's horrifying. What are we watching?
Well, this is one where they point out, like, because we say that no jail for them or anything. This is like one kind of doing a striptease around like little kids. But the thing they're pointing at is there's this one here where this like girl goes up and rubs them right there, and everybody's freaking out about that.
Well, kids touch you in weird places. But like as soon as a kid grabs your balls, you say, "Oh no!"
Right.
That dude's just sitting there like, yeah.
Because that thing is like the idea that
But jail? Do you think jail?
Some people, no, not jail. not jail for this. But like, why are we doing this? Like, why don't we show cabaret to children?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? Isn't it for all the reasons that that's supposed to be positive? Why don't we show cabaret? Why just not trans? Why just drag queen stuff?
I don't know why we don't just show porn to kids, because porn isn't inherently sexual, and if you tell me it is,
Oh,
then
yeah,
you're
that's right.
sexualizing it, and you have to prove to me that it is inherently sexual.
Oh wow, you just
So
broke
this-
the whole thing.
So I think
So
I think the strongest argument is like, well, we're okay with the cheerleaders and the dance squad and stuff, and they're clearly sexualized as well, and we encourage our little girls to go start learning
Can
how
I
to dance
say-
at a small age.
There was never a time in my life that I didn't think the whole cheerleader thing was weird.
Okay, that's fine.
Like, I always
but
thought it was weird.
why aren't
that
we
I'm like,
spending
why
our-
are there girls
There's-
dressing up and dancing
But we're
everywhere?
not-
Like all the school stuff. Like
but there's
and we
no
make an
attention.
exception for the dress code so that they can...
yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, but yeah, it never made sense to me.
But we're not spending any time and energy like criticizing that. So it's like that's what
in Mormon
Well-
communities, they did.
right. That's
Yeah.
true.
That's true. But the other thing is like, well, and why don't we criticize? I mean, a big part is because, like the main driver of cheerleading is women. It's not men. Like you can look at the people doing it, the organizations behind it, the money. It's girls. Little girls want to be cheerleaders. The boys could take it or leave it. Like that's how I feel about cheerleading. Is like I tolerate it because girls want to do it. Okay. But like, if it weren't for that, it'd be like, why are we doing this? Stop.
Mhm.
See, my answer to that is always, because they'll try to point out, well, you're not criticizing this, because when you do, when that Desmond is Amazing kid blew up a couple years back, like dancing like Gwen Stefani, and I would criticize that. He's dancing with a bare midriff as an 11-year-old boy on stage at an adult bar where men are throwing dollars at him. That feels pretty sexual, even if I don't make it sexual. But when I would bring it up, any complaints, they'd always be like, "Oh, well, you don't care about you guys. Why don't you guys criticize things like Toddlers and Tiaras, huh? All these people that are saying they don't like drag kids, they don't like they don't criticize Toddlers and Tiaras." And well, okay, A, they did. Like a lot of people hated that. And B, if they didn't, okay, let's do it now. Like I am so on board with demonizing dance moms and criticizing the Toddlers and Tiaras thing. I'm not gonna stop criticizing a bad idea just because I wasn't also criticizing a congruent bad idea.
I was just thinking it's on a similar line because there's that stupid old feminist trope about like when women have a lot of sexual partners, they're sluts, but when men do it, they're whatever it is, they're dudes. And just because like there's a guy at my work right now, like he's been there for a year or two now, but like he came in and was totally open about his whole polyamory thing and talking about trying to get a redhead and all this stuff and everybody thinks he's a creep.
Yeah, that's
Like,
pretty
we
repulsive.
all are like, I was just like, what's that guy? Why is he like? Why are we even talking about this here? We don't care. And
Yeah,
we even had to
did
talk to him a
people
little bit
gain-
about like you can't talk to women like you do and stuff. And it's just like, but just one dumb little anecdote. But like, yeah, I've always my entire life, men who are like that, people are generally like that guy's a creep. I've never.
Yeah, I feel like those
seen
guys
the-
aren't generally accepted by the people that are around them, and it makes me think that the people who criticize in that way, like all of their knowledge and inferences about men just gained from one American Pie movie or some shit like that, where all of their
Yeah.
bros are standing out like, "Bro, I got laid 4 times this week." Yeah, bro, nice.
Yeah, I mean it really is a dumb stereotype. I mean that's absolutely true.
Because if one of my friends comes and gives me like details about his sex life, I usually say, "Please stop."
Yeah, sure. It's like I want to know this.
I'm a
Yeah.
very visual person. You have to stop talking about this.
You're gonna have to show me.
You're good.
I'm a very visual person. You're gonna have to show me.
Oh man. I don't know about laws. That's I don't know about laws, and I don't know about changes. I don't know about anything.
Yeah, no, that is one where it's like, because I mean, I basically agreed. I was mashing potatoes, and you guys are talking, but like, because like I get the arguments about like well, some 16-year-olds are very mature, and some 30-year-olds are very immature. Like, yep, gotta draw. We gotta pick a line, and we're just gonna have to go. We do the same thing with a million other things. Like I mean, like automobiles. Like driver's licenses.
Speed limits.
Like one of the things, like I remember, there's another thing where I was just driving around one day and I had this thing and it's stuck in my mind forever. Was just that thought is because like we all remember being small and on the playground, and like and there's the people who like when the ball comes to them, like just and total and they just no spatial reasoning. No sense of teamwork or coordination. That's fine. That's okay. And then those people grow up and we give them a driver's license. Like, the exact same person that was afraid of the ball is now thundering down the road in an SUV. It's just like, I mean, I had this thought because I was driving with my mom, honestly, and I was like, God, you have no situational awareness.
I'm terrible at multitasking. I can't drive and talk at the same time. I'm on autopilot and talking, and then I'll go places that we're not actually going. Like head to the school as I'm supposed to be going to the grocery store. Yeah.
Have you got more clips?
You want to see Canada, dude?
My mashed potatoes are done in my roast chicken.
Your
mashed potatoes are done?
I think we decided this guy is
Chicken's
just a
in the oven.
master troll, right?
But I do want to see Canada guy. I love all manner of Canadians.
Canada guy.
Oh,
this
that
guy's
guy.
a massive troll.
It's gotta
See,
be.
that makes so much sense that this is all just.
Well, I
like
made the
this
joke.
Mr. Garrison
I made the joke to my
level.
wife because we were talking about it the other day. She's like, he really wore that, and I was like, okay, but what if he's a troll? Because like if those are prosthetic breasts, they're not even like implants. They're just he puts them over his shoulders, right?
Yeah.
And you look at the nipples, you can see them. They're massive and they jut out under like an inch of fabric and you can see them. And you're like, he had to pick that out. Like on some website of weird, customizable, gigantic, unrealistic sized boobs that you can order to your house. He had to pick out the nipples that are like that big around and just jut out like a fist. So he's got to be fucking with me, right?
So I just looked it up to confirm, and it's even earlier than I thought. The South Park episode where they basically do this, like if this guy really is doing a big troll to get fired, South Park did this June 20th, 2001.
The teacher who had the jugs that when she raised her arms and
the episode was that it's not exactly the same thing, but it's the thing where Mr. Garrison because he gets fired for being gay. And then he gets rehired, and then and they say, no, we'll never fire you for being gay now because we'll give you $1 million. You'll get millions of dollars in a settlement. So that's when he introduces Mr. Slave. You remember that episode?
Yeah.
And so like he decides like, oh, I'm just going to be so gay they have to fire me, but they just keep applauding the whole time. But this guy, I think, might actually be able to pull this off. He wins no matter what, right? He gets to either fuck off and keep his job. Or he gets
if he gets fired, and they're saying that he's doing it for that reasons. I'm guessing that it is. I heard somebody joke and say, "Well, now we know where all the baby formula went." But
so this is a better example of a thing that I'll do this on a micro level if I'm arguing with people on Facebook, because if they give me an ingenuous reason that, like the no uterus, no opinion thing, if you're arguing abution.
You have opinion on abortion?
I don't I do because I have a uterus, and that's what I tell them. I just tell them, oh, I have a uterus, and that's the thing. It just shows that their argument isn't disingenuous, but it also like they ascribe to a cult that they can't question me when I say that, because people will. One guy in a group, like a very left-leaning group that I just infiltrated to watch and get screenshots because it's funny. I said that at one point that I do have a uterus, and the guy like looked through my profile pictures and he's like, I think this is just a guy. I don't think he has a uterus. He's got a wife and 2 kids. I'm pretty sure. And I said, I didn't think this would be the kind of place where I'd be outed like this or whatever. And that guy got kicked out of the group.
Oh, no
Whoa.
way.
I got booted out of the group for being the only sane person there who looked at me and was like, "That's an obvious
Jeez.
male." I could look at
Did
him
you
and say,
private message him and say, buddy, you're absolutely right. I've got good news
"Yeah,
and
you're
bad
right.
news.
Get out of this cult, man." But that's what this guy seems to be doing. That just like, okay, I'm going to use your own ideology against you. I'm like,
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things where, like I've said before, it's like, you know, that's one of the things that South Park has had their fingers on this pulse. And like on all of these things, where it's like, you want to see how this will be exploited, just watch how Cartman reacts. And you'll see how it's exploited. And there's the whole episode about Cartman and the transgender thing. And then like everything, South Park did it, and then it happened a few years later in real life.
Yeah.
What's that?
don't be
I
a
just
sissy.
started
Watch the
South
episode.
Park. I haven't watched all of them.
Oh my gosh.
The point
no
is,
spoilers.
Cartman's a little sociopath who thinks of every angle to game every single system. So it's almost kind of like,
Well, I've
Every
watched
single-
enough to kind of gather the characters,
put-
and then
he
what's
puts
his
a
name
whole-
dies every episode. But
Yeah.
Kenny.
So
And the
the
older
episode
ones,
of
they don't do
Cartman,
that
like
as
the-
much.
The whole
anymore.
point is that like Cartman is tired of having to shit in the boys' bathroom, and
'Cause it's
so he
gross,
just
or what?
simply decides to, because it's, well, yes, everybody
Yeah.
knows men.
yeah, I've cleaned boys'
Any-
bathrooms for the church house. Yeah, I
Any
know.
public school male bathroom is a nightmare. Junior high is the nightmarest of, it's the peak nightmare. But yeah, so like he comes up with the scan, he'll just be a girl, and then they have to let him use the girls' bathroom, right? But then of course the girls, like, they don't like Cartman shitting
that
in there
Quaku?
every day. So they
Yeah.
complain, and so then the school comes up with the solution of, we'll just give Cartman his own bathroom, you know, and that's basically like, and that's what we're seeing all the time with the trans thing. Is like, okay, we'll just have to carve out the space for them. We'll just give them their own thing. That was this
Yeah.
Quaku.
I
This
came across
guy.
this on TikTok, and this is
Is he
putting-
meta Mormon? I think he's meta Mormon.
He's
I don't
putting
feel like
putting the
he's a tough nut because he had some really cool conversations on his YouTube channel. I like the bridge building ones. That's just the ones I'm drawn to. And he had some really cool conversations with some Christians and a Christian pastor, but he took them all down. And I emailed him, and then when I talked to him in person at the RFM debate, I was like, "Hey, you should respond to my email. I'd really like to get those videos, or like have a copy of them." And he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." And then of course he didn't. But
Well,
anyways,
one of them he like stormed off, I'm pretty sure.
oh, not that one. These are ones
Oh.
that he was face to face, and then like they had some kind of rapport before
he
they were friends.
Oh.
stormed off with a Christian.
He's a couple of times he's been in debates with, like, I don't know, there's a couple of those guys that are like these crazy well-versed, like the Apologia Studios. He didn't totally like
That one was okay. I thought he held
didn't
his own on that
storm
one.
off during that one, but like, I don't know, like it, and it's all the same to me because like I'm not a Bible guy, so like, but these guys seem to know the Bible more than he does, and I don't know, he kept getting I can't remember. It's been a long time. I used to watch a bunch
That
of
one's
Quaker
still up.
stuff.
You can see that one because that one wasn't on his channel. So
Mm.
that one's still on the internet somewhere. I'm trying to remember.
This is how you put the cat back in the bag.
There's 4 seasons.
Okay.
So the sun would rotate around to give us like day, night, 4 seasons.
And you believe there's only 4 seasons if there's a rotation.
Yeah,
And why do you believe that?
I don't know.
It's because they just told you that when you were a kid. You never questioned it, right?
Well, there's not even 4 seasons
Deconstructionism.
anymore, so-
Exactly. There's not. That's actually a great point. I never
Yeah, they just told you. That's the only reason they just told. Yeah, that's the most of the deconstructionism that comes from.
thought about that until now. I'm
No,
going to start
no.
using that. Think about this: if the Earth was flat, it could still be rotated around. You know, if a saucer is on the table, it'll flat. You could rotate around it if you wanted to.
True,
What's
true.
stopping the sun from rotating around?
So do you think it's a
flat.
circle and flat?
I think it's more of a squash.
Pictures.
Oh, the pictures like from NASA.
Yeah.
The pictures from NASA that are CGI, that they openly admit are CGI, photoshopped images.
Yeah.
See, you've never questioned this, have you? You just believe the Earth is round because Bill Gates told you. Right now, you're standing normally. Okay. If you were to be flipped upside down, the blood would rush to your head, wouldn't it?
I think so.
I mean, blood would just rush down. Obviously, you've done that before. You know, you fall, blush, the blood goes. So my question for you is: people in Australia, on the bottom of the globe, they're technically like this, and you're like this, aren't you?
I guess so.
So why is the blood not always rushing to their heads?
I don't know.
You don't know, because there's the same amount of gravity as here, as is there, correct? And the same amount of gravity is also in effect if you were to be flipped upside down. So theoretically, if people are upside down on the opposite side of the world, why is the blood not rushing to their head?
Because the Earth is flat.
Thank you.
So I think it's meta. I think it's
Oh yeah, he definitely doesn't believe that.
Well, I don't. Is that girl really that dumb? Is another thing. I mean, it's possible, but
Well, he wasn't really priming her to say the Earth is flat, so I think it was staged.
Yeah, I think she was just wanting him
Yeah.
to fuck off.
well, I don't know, because I mean, listen, it's like part of me is like, well, who literally doesn't know, that like how gravity works?
Yeah, I know.
But then at the
Have you
same
thought
time,
of this?
This
Check
is
this
the
out,
same
though.
week. Hang on, this is the same week that NPR published a story explaining why we have seasons.
Yeah.
Like the equinox is different from the solstice. This was on NPR.
Yeah. That it was kind of just like a feel-good
I love
story from like Vogue or something like that. That NPR is just Vogue now. Teen
It
Vogue
is,
is turned
baby.
into like commies are us, and NPR is just old teen.
Crazy.
Well, alrighty, y'all. Anything to add at the end? Earth's still flat.
Yeah, it's still
I was
Put
just
the
saying,
cat back in the bag.
the weird something that I want to know about, and it kind of creeps me out, is because like I bought a package of chicken leg quarters, and there's 4 of them, and there's 3 right legs and 1 left, and that just for some reason that's disconcerting.
Because that's a thing I would not have noticed.
There are 4
And then-
chickens. You got 4
Yeah,
chickens.
where it's like, what's
killed.
going on? Like, why can't I get? I've also got this kind of Hitler hairdo thing going on. Yeah. You see,
Yeah,
no,
just need the mustache.
Yeah.
You're like if Hitler went to art school.
Did Chris tell you his brilliant idea? It's because I had this idea. I've had a million ideas for TV shows, but I want to do an idea about a TV show, and it's kind of like a time traveling thing about a group of people, and they have a mission every week, and they have to go fix something in history, and there's like a rule about how you can't kill anybody, you can't hurt anything, and like there's that trope about like, well, if I had a time machine, I would kill Hitler. And and I was talking to Chris in his backyard, and like I have this problem, like I want to do one, but like what do we do, because the trope is kill Hitler, what do we do? And Chris had the brilliant idea, is the way they tried to save the world from Hitler is they go back in time and try to launch his art career. Which would be brilliant. And then of course the twist, because the twist of the show will be that no matter what you do, history always ends up being what it is. And like he'll meet a Jewish girl that breaks his heart, and
it still just ends up the same anyway.
yeah, like and like he'll end up getting sucked into like corporate world of advertising and becomes disillusioned with capitalism and ends up just holocausting anyway.
No.
But there'll be more art.
You guys going?
Well, nigga, you gonna be at the function, bro?
I don't think so.
Why? What the fuck's your problem?
Stuff cracks me up. TikTok has good stuff going on.
That was fun.
You gotta send me that one.
Oh man.
All right.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Marty.
Yeah.
You can give us critiques all you like. We won't
like 'em.
get upset and not
Well, may not be good. I just
Like your screen keeps flashing green. That's a critique of you.
It's because my headphones are plugged in. It doesn't do it when my headphones are not plugged in. So it's something, I don't know. I used to do it worse. But
All right.
anyways.
right
Cool.
on.
See you guys.
Have a
See ya.
good one.
See you later.
Later.
How do you leave?
You just
You
exit.
just kind of hang out for a
I made
while.
it big. There you go. Okay, see you
Found it.
guys.